Before we get started here at Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, I want to thank our sponsor, Iowa Smokehouse, and their awesome game day snacks, folks, but they're good really on any day. Of course, we've got football in full swing now in the middle of September. Iowa Smokehouse offers a full lineup sure to satisfy you and your family's snacking needs, whether it's their beef jerky, their meat sticks, their steak bites, or even their barbecue sauces and ketchups. You'll never need to look anywhere else. Tasting is believing with Iowa Smokehouse. Visit iowasmokehouse.com and use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. Again, that's the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. And Brad Van Meter and his team down in Des Moines. Check out the awesome rates they can offer for you and your family, whether it be auto insurance, home insurance, renters, business, life insurance. They spend countless hours taking care of your needs, and they review coverages each and every year. In fact, Brad has told me that rates have never been as low with auto insurance as they are right now. They're saving people a lot of money. Give them a call down in Des Moines, 515-256-6480. Again, 515-256-6480, or visit www.bradvanmeter.com. Camping the Night Away is coming up Thursday, October 5th at Cedar Ridge Winery and Distillery in Swisher. This annual Children's Cancer Connection event is one way you can support Camp Heart Connection camps, offered free of charge to Iowa families affected by childhood cancer. Enjoy a camp-themed evening of food, drinks, games, auctions, and raffles, all for a great cause. Get tickets at childrenscancerconnection.org. That's childrenscancerconnection.org. We are live here, Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. The Iowa Hawkeyes defeating the Western Michigan Broncos 41-10 on this Saturday, and we feel like we're missing something. What are we missing? Let's see. Of course, our little Brian Ferentz tracker. You see the number is in green now, and the arrow is going up and is also in green. That means that he's trending in the right direction. 28.3 points per game now is the number through 3 games. Iowa putting up 41 on Western Michigan, pretty much the bar that I think most people wanted. And if you're Brian Ferentz, as good as you could have really expected, albeit a really weird start to this game. We'll talk about it. We're going to be joined by Coach Don Patterson here in a little bit. Also, Hawkeye Report's own Tom Kakert will be joining us. fresh off the post-game press conference with Kirk Ferentz. So we'll look forward to that. If you're new to the show, please be sure to take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe if you've not done so. We go live each and every week, sometimes multiple times per week. We're here recapping each and every Hawkeye football game and men's basketball game, and you can count on the fact that we'll be around for a lot of the women's basketball coverage this year as well. So be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell your friends about what we're doing here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. The call line is open. The Iowa Smokehouse call line is open. The number to call, 515-635-1601. Again, 515-635-1601. If you want to chat about Iowa's 41-10 win. Just a very strange game on a lot of levels. It's almost like the first half was a totally different game from the second half. You had the brief lightning delay. You had the injury to Luke Lachey, which we'll talk about. You have the somewhat abysmal numbers from Cade McNamara, but then you balance those with a ground attack that looked much better today, albeit against a bad defense. So what do we make of it all? Well, hopefully you all will help me sort this out. And, of course, we'll try to do the same for you. Tom Caker will help us, and certainly Coach Don Patterson. He'll be with us shortly as well. Before we get to Tom and to Don, let's get to our first caller of the day. Alex is with us. Alex, welcome.
Good. Well, good evening. That lightning delay pushed us back a little bit. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm just glad. Hey, a year ago at this time, not precisely, but it was week 3 last year. I believe you came up to me. We were both at the Nevada game.
Yeah, I was done. Yeah.
We dealt with 3 lightning delays that night. So let's just be happy that we got out of there with a 20-minute delay tonight.
Yeah, I didn't go to 3 a.m., 4 a.m., some crazy number like that.
Insane.
Anyways, so before I began, obviously we talked about how weird that first half was. Let's take a broader scope and look across the country. Georgia was in a battle with South Carolina. They were down 14-3 at the start of the second half. They only won 24-14. They were almost a 30-point favorite. Florida State had trouble with Boston College. They only won by 2. They're the number 3 country in the world. Alabama had its issues with South Florida. They won 17-3. They were tied going into that second half. So it's been a weird week. What?
I was going to say that's the one that I'd point to, because Boston College, no disrespect to Boston College, South Carolina. Those are both Power 5 teams. South Florida is not.
Yeah.
And now Western Michigan is not very good. We've talked about this. They're bad. They lost 48-7 to Syracuse. Now, here's what's weird about Western. And again, I want to get Coach Patterson's thoughts on this, because if you go back, and they talked about it during the broadcast today, if you go back and watch that Syracuse game last week, they struck first in that game as well. Hit a big play with Jalen Buckley. So they have this tendency, it seems, to hit a big play or two. And they do have big playmaking ability through the air and on the ground, but they just cannot consistently gain yardage and move the ball down the field. And boy, it's amazing that an offense like Iowa's, maybe this is a good sign for the Hawkeyes, but an offense like Iowa's can struggle, have 0 points at the end of the first quarter, and still put up 41.
Yeah. So, I mean, during the lightning delay, I was obviously very frustrated, but it was like, okay, stop and think, looked at other games across. Even I think Maryland had some issues with Virginia. Like, they were kind of in a dogfight, and then Maryland eventually just pulled away. So it's kind of a weird week. It's one of these weeks where it's like, oh, there's no exciting games on, but then you have, Alabama barely beating South Florida team. I mean, yes, Boston College and South Carolina are a Power 5 team, but South Carolina's offensive line is one of the worst in the country, and they hung around with Georgia. And Mizzou beat a ranked Kansas State too. So it's one of these games where it feels like a week where kind of anything is possible. Obviously happy to see Iowa eke out the victory. So I do have some notes, positive and negative.
Yep.
Do you have a preference on which one I start with?
Do whatever you want, Alex. I'm here.
Well, okay, let's start negative. We'll end on the positive and on a happy note. So, obviously, Luke Lachey, you see the replay, and you could see his right ankle had a looked like that ankle was slightly bigger than what it should be. I've had a compound fracture. Mine was in my arm, and I've actually had to get surgery for it. So obviously we're waiting to hear the news. I hope it's just like a dislocated ankle. If it's that, then he's probably out for a couple of weeks. But if it's a break, I don't know if he has an extra year of eligibility or if he can get a medical red shirt. But it looked pretty gnarly. Cade, 2 interceptions against not a great Western Michigan defense. So it was, and the second one at the end of the half where Brian Ferentz was visibly frustrated. One, I believe was to Seth Anderson or Deontay Vines. I can't remember which one. He missed. He was late on the throw because he had him wide. He needed to get that ball out, I think, 1 or 2 seconds earlier.
Yeah.
And 2, he stared him down the entire time. Like he didn't take his eyes off him because he knew he wanted to go to Seth Anderson. He didn't look him off or look at another wide receiver, then look to him. It was a straight, just, I know where I'm going with the ball. So he kind of telegraphed his move, but Cade didn't look great. He felt like he held on the ball for a little too long. That could be a credit to Western Michigan's back 7 keeping our guys in check. But then on top of that, we're still rolling Cade out there with 8 minutes left to go in the game where we're up 21 points. And it's just like, man, I get like we saw, kind of maybe sneak into the positives. We saw him under center. Like that, pretty much Iowa State, Utah State, he was all in shotgun. We saw him under center more times than I think we saw him in shotgun. So I know that was a point where, like, because when you're under center, you have to step back and have to plant and everything like that. So that's a good sign that his leg's feeling healthy. And we saw him run for 8 yards, but they went back and you could see him wincing and grabbing his right leg. So hopefully that's just kind of I haven't used this muscle in a long time and I'm just a little sore. Well, fingers crossed on that one.
I would say just to jump in there, Alex, and I'll let you go. But the notion that Cade was, heard some people earlier in the week. Well, Cade sounds like he's close to 100%. Cade made the comment on Tuesday that he felt as good as he's felt in like the last month. All I know is you watch him run on that first drive, and he looked like, I don't want to say like an old man, but he was gingerly running across the field, and then you could see the camera zoomed in, and he was wincing.
Yeah,
and I'll just tell you my reaction when I saw that. My reaction, Alex, was, why is he out there? Just get him out. Why is he practicing? Why is he in the game? That's my reaction. I know people are going to get mad about that because they don't like my opinion on that. That's fine. That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to it. I don't think he should have played today. But I'm not a doctor, and I'm not on the medical staff. I'm not there every day. But judging on that early reaction from him running down the field, I wish they had shut him down. And we talked about that earlier in the week.
Yeah.
And it was dismissed by a lot of people. He needs reps. He needs to gain chemistry with his guys. Well, that may be true, and I could be wrong. But I'm just stating my opinion. I think they should have shut him down. He does not look healthy to me, and he took a beating today.
Oh, he 4 sacks. 4 sacks, I think 4 carries or knockdowns. And especially late in the games, like, why are you rolling him out there? You're asking him to get injured at the point, or at least, make the injury worse. That was something I was frustrated with. It's like, and Deacon Hill looked, when he got in the game, he looked good. Give him the reps,
Well, that's the thing. I just, they won this game 41-10 in spite of a first quarter that is maybe one of the worst quarters in Iowa football history. Maybe that's exaggerating a little bit. But you're telling me, Alex, they couldn't have done this with Deacon Hill at quarterback? They didn't win this game because of Cade McNamara.
No, he looked well. There was one throw where he had, and I can't remember who it was, on the sideline, and he just skied it. It looked like a Spencer Petras pass. Like it was like no one in his face. Like it was a really bad throw, and it made me like, man, is that leg really bothering him? But But okay, let's go positive now. Let's talk some good things. The running back room looks deep. Jazzy and Patterson, I don't know why he was out. I know he was in the locker room. He got in for a little bit. Didn't run too much after that. LaShawn Williams looks healthy. He looks good. I can't think of the guy that got the 2 touchdowns. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. He looks good.
You talking about?
And then what's up?
Moulton.
Moulton, yeah. And then Max White, hey, good fourth piece. Nice to see him get a touchdown too. So, but yeah, so I think the running back room looks deep. I think I feel pretty confident about that. The run blocking looked improved, but you got to weigh who we were playing.
Exactly. And they did absolutely. Let's just call a spade, is one of my favorite expressions. 254 rush yards, 5.9 yards per rush. I can live with that. I don't care. I mean, like, yes, they're playing Western Michigan, but guess what? I'm not going to insult you because you played a bad team. I'm going to ask myself, did you do what you needed to do? Or I'm going to ask you, did you do what you needed to do against your opponent? And they did. 254 rush yards, 5.9 per carry. They dominated up front. And, besides the weird first quarter, which featured, a terrible pass by Cade McNamara on that first pick into double cover, terrible decision.
He was double tapping, or were they patting the ball? And even in the announcers were saying he's got to quit doing that. He was holding on the ball for a little too long.
I'm not making excuses. He's got to get better, but I do think he's dinged up. I'm with you, and I don't know. I don't know if he was under center a lot more today with Lachey out. The good news is Iowa can deal with that from a depth perspective because you talk about depth at running back. They're even deeper at tight end right now. This will give Iowa fans an opportunity to see guys like Steven Silianos, who a lot of people, I mean, you've known about Alex, but a lot of casual Hawkeye fans have no idea who that is. But he's a guy who they brought in out of the transfer portal a year ago. It took some time to kind of get acclimated to the Big Ten and to Iowa football. He's there now. This is his last year. This is going to be fun to see him evolve. I want to see Luke back because he's good. I think he's an NFL tight end. But yeah, I'm with you. Overall, positive. Everything was very positive. They ran the ball well. They didn't pass the ball well, but part of that is because they didn't need to. I mean, they just controlled the game on the ground.
And then we saw Bo Stevenson too on that second touchdown. They mentioned him in the game, or the fourth touchdown they got, that rushing touchdown they got. They mentioned him, so I know he's been out for a while with injury, so it's good to see him get back in the lineup. I think that'll just strengthen that depth of the offensive line. I think he's a really good piece there. Special teams, in LeVar Woods, we trust, I guess. So
one miss from Drew Stevens. Somebody sent me a very, very odd stat, and I'll bring this up to Coach Patterson later. This is going to maybe blow your mind as well, Alex. Listen to this stat. According to someone who I trust on this, Drew Stevens, dating back to high school, he is 2 of 2 from 50 plus between high school and 2 of 2 in high school from 50 plus. He's not missed a 50 plus kick at Iowa. He's perfect from inside of 40 at Iowa. And yet in high school and in college, he's 1 for 7 from 40 to 45.
There was another kicker like that. I saw that where it was like inside like the 30, he was perfect. You get him outside 45, he's perfect or missed one. And then when you get him in between range, he was there was another kicker. I saw that earlier in the year. I can't remember who it was.
So that's something that can be cleaned up and will need to be fixed, especially if he's trying to kick in the next level. He's got the leg for it. But yeah, those numbers are not good. But overall, you're right. Special teams is really good. We saw Cooper DeJean break off at least a couple nice punt returns today. We hadn't really seen that yet. It looks like Caden Weegan, at least for the time being, with Caleb Johnson out, Weegan is the guy on kick returns. We saw him work in a little bit with punt return as well. So yeah, teams was solid.
Yeah, no, I think I think he's going to be. Maybe next Charlie Jones, that guy's got nice some speed to him. And then just finishing up here, I thought there was no penalties. I kind of looked real quick at the stats. I think they said Iowa had 1 for 5 yards. I don't know when that happened, but very clean game. And it's always nice to see when Iowa has that nice clean game. And then, hey, Iowa covered. They covered the 28.5 or whatever it was, 29, whatever it ended at. So,
Last question for me to you, Alex. And I'm not going to, unless somebody wants to ask me for my explicit opinion on this, I want you to tell me your opinion because I'll get ripped for it one way or the other.
You're going to let me take the fire.
Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you this, Alex. How did you feel? Were you at all uncomfortable in the last 40 seconds by anything? The last 40 seconds of the game? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then then
Oh, I mean, not that I can think. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean by uncomfortable? Like,
I just knew that some of the people that and they weren't like buddies of mine, but some of the people that I was watching this game at a restaurant, some of the people around me thought it was an uncomfortable look for Iowa to run the ball in with under 40 seconds when they could take a knee and end the game.
ow, who the?
Well, Alex, here's the problem. Here's the problem. And here's why this matters. And I go back to it, and I'm not saying I agree with that or disagree with it, but Iowa, they're the ones that put this Brian Ferentz 25 point per game contract out there. So they're the ones who made it public. So they have themselves to blame that becomes a talking point when they pat on a late touchdown with 20 seconds to go. That's their fault.
But it wasn't. Iowa didn't get the ball with 40 seconds. There was like 3 minutes left on the clock, so they had to run some type of offense, and that's when we saw Deacon Hill, and he threw it a few times. I think it's more of like reps. And Iowa's up big to where, and again, like Iowa got the ball with about 4 minutes left on the clock, so you had to run some type of offense.
Agreed.
And you put your backups in, you get them reps, and then if you're going, it's like, okay, we're just going to go. We're just not going to stop. If I was only up by 7. And then, you run a little bit of offense, get a couple first downs. Okay, now we're going to knee it out and just go home. But we're up so big. It kind of didn't matter if we had a turnover or anything like that. I'm not uncomfortable by them scoring that touchdown because it was a bunch of backups and that Max White's a walk-on. I just think it's just more reps. I'm not uncomfortable with that. I don't think it was like, if I get 40, some 41 points, I get 25 points. I don't think there's anything behind that, honestly. If Iowa had the ball with 40, got the ball back with 40 seconds left, and they start doing that, I could be a little more uncomfortable with it. But given the circumstances, they had the ball with about 4 or 3 minutes left, so they had to do some type of offense. I don't care, and they were rolling, so it's like, hey, let's just kind of keep it going. Let the backups get some reps because eventually, you never know when you're going to need them. So
I have no opinion. I have no problem with your take on that. All I would say, I would ask you, Alex, is to understand why some people's minds would go there when there's under 40 seconds left and it's 3rd down and goal. It's if that contract thing weren't hanging over the head of Brian Ferentz, nobody would think anything of it. We'd all be like, yeah, score. Let's get more points. But like there's the people, and that's just the fact, they're out there that are like, Brian's padding the numbers.
Yeah. I don't really think it's that personally, but I do see that side of it. I do see where people are thinking Brian's trying to save his job. Let's get another touchdown. It's 3rd and goal on the 1, and it's like, okay, I can see do we go for it? Do we need it out at the same? But we were driving down the field. Let Deacon Hill, let Max White get that last touchdown. Let him, get that that experience, that because you never know when they're going to get it again, and you never know when, hey, K goes down, Deacon, hey, your number's called, and that extra game reps do help a little bit. So that's my opinion on it. I do see that side of it. I think it's people who are, I think maybe are really trying to get Brian Ferentz out of here. Now, the play calling, I think was atrocious throughout the game. And regardless if he hits that 25 points a game or not, I think he needs to be gone by the end of the season. If Iowa barely beat Western Michigan, I would say get him out of here after this game. But, obviously they tacked it on it, as the game went on. So, but I do see it. It didn't make me uncomfortable that they scored that last touchdown. I mean, like I said, if they had the ball back with 30 seconds left and they did that and they tried to make offensive plays, then it looks a little more suspicious. Yep. But with them having 3 to 4 minutes left in the game, you have to run a few plays to kind of bleed the clock, and they were just having success. Like, well, okay, let's just keep going. We have some momentum. So yeah.
All right, Alex.
That's all I have, sir. I appreciate you taking the call. I hope you have a wonderful night. Go Hawks.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you next week, Alex. Thanks. Good to see you, Esther, in the chat. Doing good and celebrating an Iowa win. I'm tired. I don't know if anybody cares that I'm tired. I feel tired. I wasn't even at the game today. It's a good thing I wasn't. Man, that'd be a long 2-hour drive home. All right, let's add the man of the hour, Mr. Coach Don Patterson. Don, how are you, sir?
I am well, Corey. How are you?
Doing good. Good to see your face. I assume you made it back. You must have made it back home relatively quickly, and a lot to unravel from today's game. We've got some callers who are on hold to talk with you. But I guess I want to first give credit where credit is due, and I want to acknowledge our RTI Threads player of the game, and I want to see if you agree with that. LaShawn Williams, 12 carries, a $145 to go along with 2 catches for 27 yards and a touchdown. I thought he was really good today, Don. Not just, first of all, last week he had 1 carry. We got to acknowledge that. He barely played last week. And,
Right.
He's kind of the forgotten man in a sense, and he came out, ran with aggression. Yards after contact. I was just really impressed with how he ran the ball today, and give credit to the offensive line, but LaShawn was really good.
Yeah, we had some good running lanes, of course, but I thought our backs as a group did a good job of taking advantage of the opportunities they had. Lots of yardage, some yardage after contact for sure, and in general, I think they did a good job of downfield with the runs.
How would you evaluate the offensive line today as a whole, Don? I mean, there seemed to be some pass protection breakdowns early. Certainly as the game went on, I perceived that the Iowa O-line was kind of wearing down that Western Michigan front, and certainly reflected in the rush numbers. As a whole, Iowa ended up scoring, obviously, the 41 points, but I had the rush numbers here. 254 rush yards collectively? Is that the number, Don?
I think so. I knew it was around 250.
5.9 per rush.
We more than doubled them. If you outrush your opponent by more than 100 yards, odds are high that you're going to beat them, of course. And we got that done. Let me see if I can pull up the stats as well. So that was good to see. I thought in general we did a better job coming off the ball. We had some clear opportunities to break some big runs and did. I don't know how many explosive runs we had beyond 20 yards, but certainly we had a lot beyond 10 yards. And we ended up in 2nd and 2 a lot. I don't know that we had a lot of waste down opportunities today. We didn't use any of them, which is fine. We didn't necessarily have to, but hopefully down the road, when percentages are even higher that we don't use waste downs, we'll be able to pull them out and use them to good effect.
Do you have belief that will happen, Don?
I'm hoping.
Okay.
I'm hoping. I wish I could be more optimistic about it, but I'm hoping. And I think the only reason I have reason for hope is that we have taken more shots down the field in general in all 3 games. So we're trying to make big plays.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a good sign.
They're trying to get the ball downfield. We talked about this against Iowa State and frankly against Utah State. But I saw myself as they were struggling in Iowa. Let's be honest. Doug is right. Rough start, strong finish, rough start. That first quarter went about almost as bad as you can imagine, given the fact that this is not a Western Michigan team that anybody perceived to be much of a threat to come in here and steal a win. And maybe that was a dangerous notion. But they come in here and it's 7-0 after the first quarter, Don. Iowa gives up several explosive plays, including at least one that was what we'd quantify as super explosive on the touchdown. What happened defensively? And it seemed like Phil Parker made some adjustments at halftime. I thought Jamari Harris looked a little bit off. I mean, he hasn't played in a year and a half. He missed all of last season, missed the first 2 games this year. What happened on those big plays?
Yeah, on the touchdown pass, I'm not sure, because I didn't have much to go on. We don't have the advantage of the TV version to look at. It appeared to me, I think I'm right on this. I believe they were in half coverage to that side of the field. And the corner's got to do a good job of protecting the hole. When I say the hole, I mean that part of the field that's hardest for the half player to get to, the free safety. So I think the guy got a pretty clean release on our corner. And so part of the blame probably lies with the corner. But then clearly Xavier got caught not giving enough depth and not being able to get to the boundary. To the credit of Western Michigan, the ball was on target, well thrown. It was well executed on their part, and they executed it better than we defended it. And I think if you had to assign blame to one person, I'd probably favor the free safety. Now, I say that, and I could be entirely wrong, but just based on how I saw it, I thought most of the most of the blame would probably lie with Xavier on that play. The guy must have gotten a pretty clean release because he was down the field in a hurry, and Xavier just simply couldn't protect that spot on the field where he was. Long way to go. Of course, Xavier has good range, but again, the guy made a good throw. Some kind of play action on that pass, as I recall, too, I think, which left Xavier a little bit flatter in the secondary, and we simply didn't get back there to defend it. Well executed on their part.
As I always do, Don, I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit here to start things out here on the show. Kalen Moulton is in the chat. I'm assuming this is a relative of Kamari, so welcome to Kalen, and kind of giving a shout out to Kamari, who ran hard, ran strong, did have that fumble near the goal line that I'm guessing Liddell Betts will look at with Kamari, and they'll get that cleaned up. That obviously could be a costly fumble, but for the most part, I thought the true freshman looked really good. Let's remember that he is a true freshman. He did not enroll early, and I kind of considered him undersized when he signed last December. Talk about the young backs, not just Jazz and Leishon, but also Kamari Moulton and Terrell Washington Jr.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, those are both true freshmen, right?
Correct. And Terrell did, for the record, Terrell Washington did enroll early. He was the only freshman to enroll early.
He was there in the spring, but this is his first season of competition, so.
And Max White. Let me just Max White as well, who's off scholarship, but the number 22, Max White, also scored that touchdown late.
And he's a true freshman also?
I don't know that Max is a true freshman. I know he's off scholarship.
Okay. Well, the first two, number 28 and number 8, I was very impressed with both of them. It looked to me like it was almost like they hadn't had to practice too much in advance of the game, and they had really fresh legs. It looked to me like they showed a lot of speed and quickness, ran hard, ran decisively. They looked good for freshmen. They really did. So that's encouraging. And it doesn't shock me because I would have to suspect that Liddell would make good choices as to who to recruit. So those guys both have a lot of promise. And that's good to know because, as we know, today Caleb was down. It's just hard to keep guys healthy. And if you have to play without one of those top 3 backs, you got those 2 freshmen waiting in the wings that can still tote the mail very well. Not sure how effective they are on pass protection. You simply can't see that much of the game all at once. So maybe they have some issues with their pass protection. I don't know that. I didn't really notice that they were specifically part of the problem on the pressures that we got. A lot of those were what you might want to call coverage sacks. Kay was holding the ball a long time. He obviously couldn't find what he was looking for. And as a result, they had more time to get to him and did. So I'm sure the old line coach, of course, is going to go back and look, and he's going to make an honest assessment, and Brian's going to do the same thing. Kirk's going to do the same thing. They're going to decide what was our primary problem on this particular sack. Was it a coverage sack or not? Was somebody beaten too soon? Did they not provide ample time to get the ball out? Maybe some of the blame goes to Cade sometimes. Maybe there was a guy open that he simply didn't find. In general, of course, he's got pretty good vision downfield. And in general, it's not much of an issue. If a guy's open, typically he does find them. So it's hard to know without really studying the video. And when I say studying it, I mean the coaches are going to look at some of these plays 10 different times just to be sure they know where the blame lies and assign the blame to the right place. That's obviously what you want to do is make honest assessment as to what happened. Don't be unfair in judging any particular player. Be absolutely fair in deciding what the primary problem was on any given play.
Now, obviously, you've not had the luxury, Don, to look back at the tape from today, and I know you will do that, just like the Iowa coaches will do that. But
Right.
Can you evaluate Cade McNamara as a whole today? It seemed that first of all, I don't think he's healthy, and I'll say that up and down. I watched him run on that first drive, scramble for a first down, and he looked like a 70-year-old man. No offense to you, Don. You're a very fit 70-some-year-old man, but I don't want to see you running the Iowa offense, especially when you're forced out of the pocket.
Right.
And then the camera, I know you didn't see this because you're at the stadium, but the camera zooms in on Cade, and you see him wincing. And Don, my reaction as the casual fan watching the game is, why is he in the game? Why didn't we shut the kid down? Because we were
Yeah.
told on Tuesday, Cade said, well, I feel as good as I've felt in a month. And Kirk was optimistic about how he felt. But I was still like, boy, I don't know about that. I'm not there every day. I'm not a doctor. Just your thoughts on Cade's performance today.
Well, my concern just as a fan today, Cade made the comment after the Iowa State game, I feel better for sure than I did a week ago. The obvious question is, how does Cade feel compared to last Saturday night? He got knocked around a lot. He got knocked around too much today. And
I agree.
The one that bothered me the most, he's back on the field. There's 6 minutes left or whatever there was left, maybe 5 minutes. I can't recall. He's still out there playing. And that third down attempt, it looked to me like that was a painful snap. I mean, I think he pretty much got blasted on that play, and he did on a few others, of course, earlier in the game. So I was just frustrated that he was out there playing because most of the backups by then had gotten into the game. But why not number 10? Number 10 should have been out there earlier. For two reasons. He needs the reps, and we need to protect Cade. And that's all the reason I need to make a change. I was just hoping that Deacon would be on the field one possession earlier. I think maybe that possession started at about the 8-minute mark, maybe, I think. Let's face it, the game's effectively over. Let's get him out. Let's let Deacon play. And
Don, I know we're just speculating, but if Deacon had started this game, hindsight's 20/20. We don't know.
Right.
But if Deacon had started this game, does Iowa lose?
No, I don't think so. No, he would have been able to play and give us a win if he had started the game, I think. Obviously, we don't know. If Cade threw 2 picks, how do we know that Deacon wouldn't have thrown 4? I don't know. We don't know. But I'd like to believe that he wouldn't. We simply don't know. But your point is, with the advantage we had in the kicking game, and by that I mean they had a punter that had some decent punts, but he out kicked his coverage, of course, and then we blocked the punt. And we had a lot of good return yardage coming from Cooper. So I'm sure that we won in terms of net punting. We clearly won that, because we had quite a few return yards. And not to mention, of course, we outrushed them 2-1 or more than 2-1. So there are all kinds of reasons that Deacon could have taken us to a win today. Thankfully, it wasn't necessary that Deacon play the whole game. We had the advantage of having Cade out there. But I don't doubt that we'd have won the game regardless of who was taking snaps, at least when you talk about those two, I think. And I say that, I don't know how well Deacon's going to play in a game that matters, a game, that's not one-sided when he's out there. But I have to believe if he's lined up ahead of Joey, then obviously the coaches have gained some confidence in Deacon for how he plays. And I would suspect he could have led us to a win just as, maybe not as well as Cade did, certainly, but the outcome would have been the same. We would have been able to win the game with Deacon taking snaps. I think that's true.
This is kind of part of the problem with how these knee-jerk reactions with fans, they knee-jerk to everything. Everything. I mean, there's people in the chat saying, Deacon is obviously better than Cade. I mean, if this is, but last week, Don, Jazz Patterson is by far. We had somebody call into the show last Saturday, and this person knows who they are, who told me, I think Jazz Patterson is going to be one of the greatest Iowa backs of all time.
Well, that's pretty lofty. There have been some pretty good backs come through here.
Yeah, maybe he will, Don, but today it looked like LeSean is going to become the greatest back in Iowa history. So we just got to stop these knee-jerk reactions. Cade did not play particularly well. Now, with 122 yards, Don, 9 of 19, the numbers don't look great. How much of the numbers, being low against a bad defense, would you attribute to Iowa just really controlling the game on the ground and not having to throw the ball downfield as much?
It's hard to say. Obviously, you might argue, some quarterbacks would argue, I would be able to get into a better rhythm if we needed to throw the ball a little bit more. We only threw, you said he had 19 attempts on the day. Is that right? So we clearly ran the ball with a higher mix of run than what we have here lately. And as a result of that, of course, we might run the ball 5 plays in a row, and now all of a sudden we're asking him to throw when he hasn't thrown lately. That happens some, and that's an issue for some quarterbacks, I think. You'll laugh, but I heard one time there was a competition at quarterback, and I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We were going to scrimmage 6 play sets, and I said to one quarterback, you'll get the first 3 snaps, and then the other quarterback will get the next 3 snaps, and we're going to do that all day. Except next time we go with our 1s and 2s, we'll let the other guy take the first 3, and you'll get the second 3. The bottom line, we're going to get equal snaps against equal opposition. You always heard me say that's the best way to judge 2 players.
Right.
Equal snap, equal opportunity against equal opposition. And then one of the quarterbacks made the mistake of saying to me, Coach, my only problem with that plan you got for this scrimmage is I don't think I can get into a good rhythm just after 3 plays. And I said, well, son, here's the problem. We only get 3 downs. If we don't make a first down on 3 downs, we probably have to punt. So here's the bad news for you. You better be ready to make those 3 snaps count. And, of course, you might only throw 1 pass on 3 snaps. Maybe you throw 3. It just depends on the play calling for that situation. But the bottom line is I don't really want to hear – I hope Kate doesn't say this. I don't think he will. I don't want him to hear him say, well, I couldn't get into a good rhythm because we were running the ball so much. A veteran quarterback probably wouldn't say that because he understands the game. I might go 5 plays without throwing a pass, and then if I need to throw one, I'm going to be ready to do it. And I'm not going to blame it on not being in rhythm. I don't think Kate would ever say that. We didn't have to lean on the pass offense to be able to move the ball down the field. We did it primarily by being ahead of the chains with our running game, and that's a nice luxury to have. You couldn't help but feel as the game played out. The good news, I feel better about the running game and our run blocking. The bad news, now I'm a little more concerned about our pass game because we demonstrated we had some protection problems, and we simply didn't have people open sometimes, and that part of the game, of course, is being able to separate from the defense.
Stop being a knee-jerk reaction fan, Don.
Oh, I didn't realize I was being. I apologize.
You've been away from the game for too long. Let's go to our first caller who's been on hold for a while. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey. This is Zach. It's been a while. How's it going?
Good, Zach. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Nice win today.
Absolutely.
Good to see that there is real good depth in the running back room. Sucks for Luke Lachey. Hopefully it's not as bad. His injury is as bad as I think people think it might be. Nice to see Ontario Thompson who got the punt block.
Very nice to see. Yeah, I'm happy for that young man. He's a good kid, and saw Brad's comment in the chat as well. Don, just how happy were you I know you don't maybe know Ontario yet, but just to see that young man who's been through a lot to get here. He went the odd route to get to Iowa from Dubuque Wahlert. For him to be able to get that block punt and see how excited he was.
I lost you.
You got me, Don?
No, you're back. Yep.
I was just saying, it was just good to see Ontario have that moment, and he got close on a couple other punts as well. He's going to be a disruption on the defensive line someday once he gets into the mix there, but he's making himself known on special teams.
Yeah, I think the average fan, there's so many unsung heroes that they don't even recognize all of them, of course, and that's a good example. Maybe your only snaps are on the punt rush. Well, you only get how many times they punt today? Let's see. They punted 7 times, eight times, counting the block punt. You're out there for 8 snaps, and, of course, there's a big delay between one snap and the next. And yet, you want to make an impact on the game too. Hard to do because their job, of course, is to keep you off the punter. But today, because he persevered and kept giving great effort, he finally had that breakthrough moment. That was a wonderful thing to see. And that's just the nature of sports in particular. You're kind of an unsung hero. You're out there and you may work hard all day. And in some cases, you never do have the impact you wanted to have. In rare cases, you do, and that's a prime example. And, of course, just 1 week ago, that blocked field goal on the opening series had a lot to do with us feeling more comfortable toward the end of the game. And, of course, the block punt ended up as a safety, right? 2 points for us.
Anything else, Zach?
Yeah, I know I caught the end of your conversation with Alex, about the last 40 seconds. I didn't have as much a problem with, a sixth string running back and basically a second string offense, scoring a touchdown, because I think it's kind of that unwritten rule that, if a game's a blowout and it's the second or third string, you can maybe let them play. The only one I might have had an issue with is basically kind of like the trick play, the reverse. That one I was just keep running the ball, but
well, I don't have a problem with any of it. The reason it got brought up, and because it got brought up in the chat, people talking about running up the score. I don't believe that happened. The problem is, Don, is this is going to get brought up every time there's a late score that doesn't matter. It's going to get brought up how Brian's trying to pad his stats. I don't think that's the case necessarily, but that's the whole problem with this thing being public, this contract, is it becomes a talking point for people like us and people in the media. Did you have any issue with the late score by Max White? But for the record, let me just say this, Don, before you comment. They did the reason it got brought up, and I think it's why it's a valid question, is they didn't start the drive, and Alex brought this up. They did not start the drive with under a minute to go, but by the time they took the 3rd and goal snap, there was under 40 seconds to go. So they could have taken a knee and the clock would have ran out, conceivably, assuming Western Michigan didn't use a timeout. Did you have any issue with that series in Iowa attacking on that late score?
Well, let's back up to the reverse to begin with. I was more disappointed to see the reverse at the end of the game for one simple reason. This should make sense to you. Exotics, as we always call them, don't want to waste anything. By that I mean, from the AAA, you want to make a different game. And if you're up by 24 points or whatever it was, clearly running a trick play at that point in the game to the other team, I will promise you, gives them the impression that you're not a good sportsman. You're not showing good sportsmanship. Why would you run a trick play when the game's effectively over? So that's why I hated to see it. I made this comment to Lisa. I said, I'll tell you why I hate that we ran the reverse right now. Maybe that reverse would have worked next week against Penn State. But now that they've seen it, I think it's less likely to work. So you don't waste trick plays.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and that's got nothing to do with sportsmanship. You're wasting it. That's a fair point. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Down the goal line, it seems to me in the past that if we've been in a situation, and I understand we've got backups in, they've got backups in, let's say there's 4 minutes left. What is your duty on offense? Well, you're okay simply to continue to play football. Does that mean you run a trick play or you try to throw it over the defense? No, but it's certainly fair game to continue to try to make first downs. And if you work your way down the field, at some point in the past, if you have a chance to take a knee, and in the process of taking a knee, demonstrate good sportsmanship, go back and look. Historically, that's what we've done. We've taken that knee, even if we were on the 5-yard line. And today we didn't. And the only problem with that is some people are going to decide that we didn't do it today because of the clause in Brian's contract. That's why we didn't do it. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's what people are going to wonder about and talk about. Yeah. And in that regard, I hate that it's going to be the subject of discussion.
Zach, I hate to cut you off, but we do have Tom Kakert waiting to jump on. Feel free to call back a little later in the show if you have time.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Zach. All right, let's add Tom to the mix. Tom, welcome.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Coach? Good to see you.
Okay. How about you?
Doing great.
So, Tom, you're fresh off a press conference with Kirk Ferentz, and Iowa, of course, fresh off a 41-10 victory over Western Michigan after a very strange first half that featured a weather delay and one of Iowa's best players, maybe their best offensive player, and Luke Lachey going down with an injury. Just talk about what you've learned from Kirk Ferentz and your sources here just about an hour removed from the final seconds ticking off the clock.
Yeah, ask Kirk after the game about the injuries. He was I think somewhat forthcoming about Luke. He didn't say specifically, but I think we all know it's major and it's season ending. It's an ankle. Um, Asked him about Jazz Patterson and Caleb Johnson, and he just said that kind of like tweaks to things. Caleb's is an ankle, I know that, and he's probably going to miss a little more time. It's more of the high ankle variety, from what I understand. So that's going to take a little bit of time. Jazz was something that apparently he aggravated last week, like a foot thing of some sort. He was late coming out after the lightning delay. So I don't know if he kind of popped out and loosened up and something didn't feel right. I know he took some good shots too early in the game, running really hard. But yeah, I think those guys were, um, you know, uh, I think there's a good chance Jazz probably gets ready for this week against Penn State, but I think there's almost no chance that you're going to see Caleb playing with a high ankle. Just he was limping around on the sidelines before the game, so if he's limping still at this point, it's very unlikely he's going to go. We did talk to Kirk about going for it late, and he kind of talked more about second team line in there and wanting to find out something about those guys. Also, wanting to learn more about Deacon Hill and how he's able to run an offense in a situation like that. So that was his point of view of why he did what he did late in the game in terms of kind of putting the foot on the gas a little bit and scoring more points. So that's his view. I know others might not share that view, and it might be controversial. But I think that's when you enter into a deal like they did for
Correct.
Brian. This is what it's going to be like all year, guys. It's just going to be like this every time they tack on a late touchdown. It's going to be about, oh, they just did that for Brian. So it's just going to be the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and fair enough. They like you said, they did it themselves by making this public and coming out with that bar. So just to go back to Luke Lachey, I did hear Ed Podolak, Gary Dolphin talking after the game, and what they were saying is that according to Rob Brooks and what he had gathered on the sideline, they didn't think it was knee. They thought it was high ankle, perhaps, for Luke. Have you heard one or the other on that? He was in a boot, obviously, on the sidelines.
Yeah, the people that I've talked to think it's broken, think it was a broken ankle, but because something was kind of hurting or looked like it was broken. So
yeah,
he was in a boot. He was in a full boot on the sideline. So we'll see. He said they were going to do further examinations on him in the coming days. So maybe we'll get more of a definitive answer. But I'm just going to be real surprised if we see him play again this year.
Yeah. My only thought on that when I saw it is people were immediately talking, is it a compound fracture? Don, if it was a compound fracture, would he have come back to the sidelines?
Gosh, I don't know. Maybe they have different philosophy about those kind of things. I would suspect if there's any way he could be safely on the sideline, they would allow him to do it. But an actual determined break on the spot, if they knew it was a break, maybe not. That's a good question. The damage has already been done, I guess you could argue at that point. If he was going to be on the sideline, of course, he was going to be as far back as he could be to be sure he doesn't get rolled up when the players storm off the field. But if it was an absolute compound fracture, maybe he would not have come back out. And I think you might be right.
Tom, the disadvantage we have when we bring you on here for a few minutes after availability with Kirk each week is I don't know what questions were asked. So I'm going to kind of take a stab at some of these. I'm curious if the subject of explosive plays was brought up, because Phil Parker, obviously one of the best in the business at limiting explosive plays, certainly super explosive plays. And Western Michigan got Iowa a few times in that first half. Did that get brought up at all to Kirk?
Yeah, it did. It also got brought up to the players. We talked to them. You guys will find this kind of funny because, Phil Parker is kind of a fiery character on the sidelines. So I asked Jay Higgins about this after the game. I said, what was he like? And, because that 64-yard touchdown happened right before the lightning delay. So you're thinking Phil is going to be in that locker room and he's going to be breathing fire, right? He's going to be coming after the guys. And there's like, Jay was like, surprisingly, he was pretty calm. And he's been kind of calm all year. So I think, he wasn't happy, but I think he's dealing with it. I think the big thing is one of the things that Jay kind of hinted at was maybe some of the guys with those explosive plays were, I wouldn't say freelancing, but maybe not following what they were supposed to do. And in the second half, they came out and everybody's like, we got to stop screwing around and just do our jobs and do them the right way. And if you do that, then you don't give up big plays. And sure enough, I think, what did they give up in the second half? Like 35 yards, 40 yards, I think, a total offense. They throttled them pretty much in the second half. So, shut them down, turned it over.
We were fortunate to have a touchdown call back too. Let's not forget.
Yes, yeah. That was a cure, and Jamari fell down on that play, and that certainly helped their cause, but it also helped that they had an illegal formation on the play to get it called back. Otherwise, it would have been a 60-yard touchdown.
Right. Not that it would have changed the outcome of the game, but it would have been embarrassing just to give up another long touchdown.
Yes.
Yep. I don't know if you got to talk to. Did you talk to LaShawn at all?
Yes, we did.
What a turnaround! I mean, I talked about last week, one carry last week, and I even speculated, he dinged up last week, and obviously it was the week of Jazz Patterson, and we got a heavy dose of Caleb Johnson, but with both those guys dinged up today, LaShawn was the guy, and man, he showed out. What was his demeanor like, and what did he? I mean, keeping your head up in the last couple of weeks when you don't get as many touches has to be a challenge.
Yeah, he's just like, hey, we got a good room, and he always says like everybody's going to eat here, kind of thing. Everybody's going to get an opportunity, and he's super high on Kamari, TJ Washington, very high on him too. And I don't know if they showed it on TV, but boy, the Max White touchdown just set off such a great celebration on the sidelines. Everybody was just so happy for that guy because he's such a team guy. And you want to see a guy like that have a moment like that, because that may end up being his only touchdown in his career, and might end up being his only carry of the rest of his career. We don't know. So, just to see that for that kid, that's why I always I'm like, I'm not going to be too upset about them tacking on a touchdown, because I know Max White, and I know the type of kid he is, and the type of person he is. He's not one of these guys that's out there trying to thump his chest and do everything. He's a total team guy, and the way his teammates reacted tells me everything about the quality of human being he is.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Don, anything to add to that, just based on?
I do have a question, Tom. Toward the end of the half, let's go back toward the end of the half. It's 14-10.
Yep.
And we're already in field goal range. I think it was 3rd and 10, maybe on the plus 31. So we're already in position to kick a field goal, and that would have been a big score at the time, because obviously up by 4 doesn't leave you much for error. Bump that up, not to mention have some momentum at the end of the half with that score, then it would leave you in better shape for the second half. I'm just curious if that decision. I was honestly surprised. I thought on 3rd and 10 we'd spread people out and run the ball, probably pick up 5 at least based on what had happened up until then. And now a 48-yard field goal would turn into an even more makeable 43-yard field goal.
Yep.
And then when we threw the ball and threw the pick, I was just curious if that was discussed.
It wasn't, but it wasn't really. But I'll tell you, Brian was running hot at that point on the sidelines because he did not like that decision by Cade. And I think Cade tried to.
Is that what he was mad at, Tom? I couldn't tell. They showed in the monitor that he was throwing. He threw the headset and he was yelling profanities. I couldn't tell who his anger was directed toward.
Well, I think he was frustrated with just like why don't we just if you're gonna don't throw it into double coverage,
Right.
and I think that's probably what it was more than anything else, because you don't want to. I mean, you want to go into the halftime, Don. You know this very well. You want to go into it with momentum. You don't want to
Right.
go it with giving them momentum, and that gave them momentum going into halftime.
Right.
When
Of
you
course,
get
the reason,
even if you get 3, you're feeling better about yourself going into the break.
right. Kate would not have had a chance to upset Brian, of course, if that particular play had been called.
Yeah.
So it all
Yeah.
started with the decision to try to put it in the end zone. But I just thought, based on circumstance, let's finish the half with momentum.
Yeah.
Let's kick it and let's be up by 7.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think you
Felt like
just get the points.
I just felt like at 14-10, I jumped on a quick live stream on the channel and I said, there's no way Iowa loses this game. I mean, you just felt like 14-10 and a lot went wrong in that first half, and you knew Phil was going to have clean up those mistakes by his DBs, and certainly they did that, shut them out in the second half. So, Tom, appreciate you jumping on. Did I miss anything that was noteworthy from the Kirk Ferentz presser or any of the players?
Not really. I think it's going to be an interesting Tuesday as you find out more about these injuries, but that just makes the task even harder for Iowa. Already an uphill battle going to Happy Valley against one of the best teams in the country this year, and now you're going to have to do it really shorthanded. Really impressed with the offensive line. I mean, they got a great push today, and they were able to sustain those blocks and knock off 8, 10, 12 yards a clip. And I think that's progress. Now, the test will be, can you do something even close to that next week? Because that's, you're today might have been JV. You're getting the varsity next Saturday, right, Don?
That's true. It's hard to measure the difference in the two D lines, but it's safe to say it'll be much more difficult to get that done next week than it was this week.
Yep.
Don, Tom, let me do, before I let you go, I know last week
Sure.
I had a couple of questions in the chat that we missed for you, and then I let you go, and then I read them later. I don't see any specifically directly toward you. I know, was it a year ago or 2 years ago that you and I, it was last year prior to the game in Kinnick, you and I talked about how this is I'm talking about Iowa, Penn State, one of the best unofficial rivalries in the Big Ten. Nobody thinks of it as a rivalry. It's not a border rivalry. It's not a cross-divisional rivalry, or it is a cross-divisional, but it's not a divisional rivalry. And yet there have been so many good games. Just think about the Kirk Ferentz, Joe Pa eras lining up, and games between 2008 and 2010. And then you had the weird 2016 game, the 2017 game in Kinnick where, boy, that game came down to the final play, and you have the Trace McSorley punt into the stands. I mean, there's just been so much drama in this rivalry. And we forget about 2018, the rainy game in Happy Valley that was strange. And then, of course, Don, you said, was it last year or was it 2 years? I'm getting years mixed up. 2 years ago when they played in Kinnick. Am I getting the years mixed up, or was that? No, it was 2 years ago, correct?
Yeah. Well, I think the game that Saquon Barkley had was one of the greatest individual performances I've ever seen by a player in person. I mean, he was just unreal player.
And let's give great credit to their quarterback in that game too. He was exceptional.
Yeah.
And let's give credit to Josie Jewell. He showed out in that game, and it was a Josie versus Saquon battle for a while, and those were both pros, and we've seen that.
And I was there. I was there in 2009 when Adrian Claiborne blocks a punt. I was there for 6-4. The strangest game I've ever covered. On a sleepy day in Happy Valley, just a few days after Kirk Ferentz lost his dad, who was living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So.
And let's not forget that a young Kirk Ferentz grew up not that far from Happy Valley.
Yeah,
I think that has something to do with it.
And his mentor Joe Moore was a legend in Pennsylvania. Don, I know you knew Joe Moore well.
Absolutely.
From minute of coaching, and but yeah, there's just so much here for this game, and so much on the line. It's amazing. Iowa's the only undefeated team in the Big Ten West right now. How about that?
Let's keep it that way.
No. Tom Kakert of HawkeyeReport.com on 3. Follow him at Hawkeye Report on Twitter. Tom, I know you'll have plenty of post-game stuff for people to consume and pregame leading up to a big week, a night game on CBS. That'll be fun next Saturday. So appreciate you jumping on, Tom, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Tom. Appreciate it. You too. Good stuff from Tom Kakert, and we're rolling along here. We've got people on hold waiting to talk to Don. We've got some super chats to get to. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more. This is Iowa Postgame with the one and only Coach Don Patterson here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor before we head to a quick commercial break. I want to thank Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm in Des Moines. Call him for a quote, 515-256-6480, or visit him online at bradvanmeter.com, in person at 4229 Fleur Drive in Des Moines. They are constantly working with their clients, folks, and insurance, specifically auto rates, with Brad and his team have never been this low. So give him a chance to save you some money. 515-256-6480, right down in the capital of the state of Iowa, down in Des Moines. Brad Van Meter and his team on Fleur Drive. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more with Coach Don Patterson.
Imagine the Possibilities is dedicated to empowering people to reach individual achievement across the spectrum of life. We believe in creating lasting relationships, empowering people for success, and cultivating joy. Our team of passionate people work each day to serve our communities in ways that create a lasting impact. We believe in creating opportunities for people with disabilities to achieve goals, build skills, and celebrate all that's possible. If you want to learn more about us or join our exceptional team, visit us at imagineia.org.
We're back here with Iowa Postgame, Coach Don Patterson, and we head to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Who's on the line?
Bronco.
Hey, Bronco.
How's it going?
Going good, man. How are you?
Good. I was going to give you a choice this week. I can unleash my usual criticism on the big BS, or I can talk to you guys about why I think Washington State and Oregon State should be invited into the Big Ten.
Okay, well, let's start with that one. That one's a little bit more intriguing to me.
All right. So if I were to ask you what Iowa's 3 most difficult remaining games are, what would you say?
At Penn State, at Wisconsin, and help me out, Don.
That third one's tough just because I think it's conceivable that Nebraska will be a lot different in November than they are now.
Haven't won a game, Don.
I know. But I guess if you put a gun to my head right now, I'd pick the Gophers.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, Minnesota. I'd go Minnesota as well.
Isn't it interesting? That's what I had too, but isn't it interesting how that third one is a bit of a rattlesnake? I mean, you really have to consider it from every angle, because I don't think there's a clear cut team there for third. But if I were to then say, okay, let's put the 4 teams that we've already invited into the conference, Washington, USC, Oregon, and UCLA, on our schedule. Let's just pretend that they're mixed in there as well. What would you say Iowa's toughest remaining 3 games would be?
If the 4 teams that are officially being added next year were a part of the schedule this year?
Yeah.
All 3 would be from the West Coast.
Well, Penn State would be. I think Penn State would.
You're right. Penn State would still be in. The other two would come from the West.
Probably USC and Washington would be my USC and Washington would be the 2 teams.
It'd be I mean, if you're following the rankings, I think it's tight between Oregon and Washington there, and I think it flip flops, right? Everything's relative to the year. But I was just kind of sitting and thinking about the Big Ten as it is now with 14 teams, and I tried to create okay, well, we're probably in agreement if we look back over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe 7, who the best 4 teams would be, and you can stop me if you think I'm wrong. But I have Ohio State, I have Michigan, I have Penn State, and I have Wisconsin. Are we in agreement there?
I think so.
Wisconsin has just a slight edge over us in that time frame.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because then I did the next 4, and that was harder. But I felt like we were at the top of that heap. And then after that, I had Michigan State in there. Again, this is looking back. This isn't necessarily where they are now. I had Minnesota in there. I mean, Minnesota's had some decent years with PJ Fleck. And then there's one more. I'm trying to remember. You guys can jump in here if you do. But I think I was really hard pressed to find somebody, and I think I put Purdue in there.
Well,
I don't even know if it matters at that point.
Just so everybody's aware, Minnesota lost by 18 today at a good North Carolina team on the road. Right. Indiana lost at home to Louisville. They were down 21-0, scored 14 straight to come back.
And how about this? Jeff Brom gets one more chance to beat Purdue.
To beat Indiana, you mean?
I mean, to beat Indiana. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Rutgers did defeat Virginia Tech, so you get another win against an ACC team. Man, Washington just trounced Michigan State on the road, 41-7. Down there, a disaster. And that game in Kinnick, Iowa, should win that game with flying colors if there's still controversy surrounding the Mel Tucker situation. I didn't watch that game, but based on the stats, based on the score, I would guess that, I would assume that that Mel Tucker controversy did not unite the players. This has hurt this team, and they were already damaged. They lost their quarterback in the offseason, had some attrition. But anyways, Bronco, I think you're right. That's why we've talked about the importance of taking advantage of the schedule this season. I was talking with a guy that I didn't know, actually another Hawkeye fan at the restaurant I was watching the game at today, and he said the same thing. He's just like, what are we going to do when USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon are a part of this conference? And I just said, well, you might not see another Big Ten championship in your lifetime. And I mean, I haven't seen one. I haven't seen an outright Big Ten title in my lifetime. But it's going to be really hard to just make that championship game year in and year out. Iowa should make the championship game this year, Don, regardless of how good this offense is and how good is pass pro, how good is the run blocking. This division's not very good. And I've defended the Big Ten West in the past because I think it's been a balanced division. Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, has talked about that. It's traditionally been the most balanced division over the last 10 years in college football. And again, listen to what I'm saying, balance. I'm not talking about overall firepower and strength at the top. But, man, with Nebraska struggling early and Wisconsin was struggling to Georgia Southern today. I think it was tied at halftime 7-7. They eventually pulled away. And they may figure things out, Don. I mean, they lost at Washington State. That's a tough road trip. But, man, nobody's really been impressive. Minnesota struggled with Eastern Michigan for a while last week. Yeah,
let's not forget that Northwestern's in complete disarray, so –
yeah, they're a disaster. And Illinois looked terrible last week against Kansas and got beat thoroughly by Penn State today. So.
Yeah, I saw the first half of a lot of the first half of that Illinois Penn State game, and the amazing thing is, you probably know, Corey, they turned the ball over 3 times, maybe in the first quarter even, or maybe in early second quarter, and yet they only had 13 points to show for it. So I thought, well, Illinois defense forced 2 field goals, and then finally on that third turnover, they gave up a touchdown. But I thought if the offense can just find their way a little bit, then maybe they can still make a game out of it. And of course, that didn't happen. I think it was 30-7, I believe, or 30-6, whatever, before a late touchdown to make 30-13. Is that the final? 30-13.
30-13, yes. By the way, you mentioned Northwestern. I missed that one. Duke beat them by 24 today. So there's that. Maryland did get a good win over Virginia. That's not a very good ACC program. But anyways, anything else, Bronco?
I was just going to add, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that if we're in an arms race and we're so focused on how we're stacking up with, the SEC, I think, for the Big Ten, if we just keep inviting these top-notch programs into the conference, I think it's going to make it really difficult for us. And I think it's important to have a little bit of balance, inviting people. And I don't know, Oregon State's a darn good club, and Wazoo beat Wisconsin. But I think when you go to reorder teams, when you invite those 4 teams in, I think you could argue Iowa's on somewhat level ground with UCLA right now. but I would put them behind the other three programs. And so, it kind of brings me full circle to how I feel bad. I really do feel bad about criticizing Iowa too much on a day like today, which they just went out and did what they could. But when you looked at the offense, I thought it was interesting that the offense struggled so much in the first half, when the doors were really wide open to do whatever it is that you wanted to do, and it wasn't until we really leaned on the line and started running right up the middle, and we did that very successfully. My problem with that is that I just think it's a model that we're not going to be able to follow next week. When we try to play these teams that are top tier and they're better at the line of scrimmage, I just don't envision a world where any of our backs are going to be able to regularly rip off 10-yard runs up the middle. And I'm not criticizing Iowa for, like Hayden said, what they always say, scratch where it itches. You take what you can get from the defense. I just haven't seen them really do anything successfully yet that I think will transfer over very well when they take a step up in competition.
Don?
That's a good point. I was simply going to say, Corey, that today it was the right philosophy to take the ball and run it down their throat. And we did that pretty effectively. And, of course, we mixed in some pass to help there too. But it's kind of hard to imagine that we're going to be able to be at all one-dimensional next week and be able to be successful against Penn State.
And let me just one more time come back to the whole topic that I've beat, and I'll say it again because it is relative to our discussion, our this process of beginning to preview Penn State next week. Part of the reason why I advocated for potentially looking at shutting Cade down is because, is he rusty? Sure. All right. And he showed that today again. But like you said, and as Bronco said on the phone, Iowa's not going to be able to go out there next week and win like they did today. They have not proven to be able to consistently and in a balanced fashion get the ball down the field to their receivers. They had a couple of plays today, had a deep ball to Vines. Seth Anderson played well. Again, I think he's been maybe their most consistent receiver. But in general, they're not going to be able to beat Penn State with 122 yards through the air. So I want as healthy of a Cade as I can get, and I don't think we're going to get that.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. So, Bronco, anything else, sir?
Just leave me on the line for a second while you answer this because I'm not where I can hear your show. But
okay.
Did anybody ask yet about that tantrum that Brian had on the sideline? Was that directed at an official? Because on TV it was hard to tell the angle of who he was talking to.
Well, I asked Tom Kakert a few minutes ago, Bronco. I asked him that question, and it sounded like from Tom's perspective, and he was there in the press box. I was watching on TV. It sounds like Brian was upset with Cade, but he was also upset with the situation and the fact that he threw it into double coverage. I don't think it was directed at an official because that was my first thought as well. It looks like maybe he's directing this at an official. Tom didn't have any reason to think that, nor did I when I watched the replay.
All right. Well, we will see you guys later. And just for my selfish feeling, I hope Iowa wins every game this year 6-5. All right. We'll see you guys later.
Bronco.
Take care.
Appreciate it, sir. Yeah, Don, just your thoughts real quick on the situation with Brian. I don't know if you saw the I don't know if we want to call it a tantrum, but he had to have a meltdown at the end of the first half off of that play that spoiled the points. Just your thoughts on that. I'm sure you probably didn't see it very well from your spot in the stands.
No, I really didn't. I wasn't aware, but I was just surprised with our thought process at that moment because, Stevens has been such a reliable kicker, and I realized he missed a field goal earlier, but his history is good, and we were already in field goal range, and I was simply shocked that we chanced losing possession of the ball on third down, knowing that at worst we'd have a long field goal attempt if we ran the ball one more time. Who knows? Maybe we'd have busted for a first down. But even if we're not likely to do that, it's kind of hard to imagine we weren't going to pick up 5, in part because it's 3rd and 10, and they might be thinking, based on formation, that we're going to throw the ball. Ideal time to run it, make it a more routine field goal than what it already was. Not to mention, finish the half with some momentum and with, more importantly, a 7-point lead rather than a 4-point lead.
All right. I love the chat, and our good friend Kyle's in the chat to be a mod. So best wishes, Kyle, on that. Let's go to our next caller, Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. James, welcome to the show, sir.
How you doing, Corey?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I'm good. First off, I know it's the Iowa show, but did y'all see the field goal that they said wasn't good at Iowa State game? What's your thoughts on that if you did see it?
Say that again, James?
The field goal at Iowa State game that they said wasn't good, but from the angle they showed it looked good. I don't know if y'all saw that or not.
Well, yeah, I did see it. They can't review it. They can't review it.
I know, but I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Well, my thoughts are I couldn't tell. My thoughts are this. The two officials who are standing below the uprights have the best view. So do I think it should be reviewable? Yes. I don't know why we can't make that reviewable, Don. We review everything else. Why can't we review it? The rule is if it goes above the upright, you can't review it. Well, what other reason would you have to review it? What other reason?
That's when the review has the best benefit, is because you don't have uprights that go on forever.
Exactly.
You also think with technology now, they should have like a camera on the top of the goalpost. You know, like one of the little ones on top of the goalpost, you can't really see where it goes over. If that makes sense on technology.
You know what? With technology in tennis, when I was watching tennis growing up, they didn't have any shot spot, and now like every close shot in the U.S. Open, it's on the big boards and all across the stands in the U.S. Open. How hard would it be to have basically some lasers going up from the uprights so that you'd be able to tell for 100% certainty whether it crossed or not? And Don, let's make sure everybody's clear on the rule. And I know this has nothing to do with Iowa. We're talking Iowa State losing to Ohio earlier today. But I'm just curious, if that ball crosses the upright, the upright, does it have to cross the inside of the upright, or does it have to touch the top of the upright, the invisible upright that's going up, if that makes sense?
You know, that's a good question. It wouldn't shock me if it might be interpreted differently from one conference to the next. I don't know that, but it would be logical to me. We've all seen field goal attempts carry them off the upright and go through. Clearly, that ball, depending on the angle it takes, maybe it takes a real extreme angle. Well, it clearly was barely. Well, that's not the best example, I guess. Yeah, the best example would be a ball that caroms off the upright and barely goes through all the way to the other upright, right? We've seen that. Who was it? It was the Jets, right? Didn't the Jets have that?
Yeah.
That field goal a week ago that barely went through. I've actually seen a ball carom off to the upright and the crossbar and go through. That was Vanderbilt versus Army some years ago. So, like as you say, Corey, as I understand it, if it's inside if the center of mass of the football is inside the upright extended, even if a little bit inside, it should be interpreted that it would have gone through, right?
But there has to be a concrete. You can't just say it can be interpreted different ways in different conferences. That's kind of absurd, Don.
Well,
like if it's touching the line, if the ball travels at any point and travels through that invisible line, that should be good, in my opinion. Or you make it a different rule, because obviously if it touches it on lower down and then bounces out, it's no good. So you have to define that, and I'm just curious how it's defined in the NCAA rulebook.
Well, to me, what's a little bit unfair, if you let's imagine that same kick, if it was a little bit lower and into the upright, you would be confident based on the flight of the ball that it's going to carom on through. In other words, it barely touched the inside part of that upright. It's clearly going to, in almost every case, it's going to be a made field goal, right?
Right.
So why should you not have that same opportunity on kicks that are above the upright? In my mind, to be fair, you should say, well, if the center of mass was a little bit inside the upright, it's good. If the center of mass is a little bit outside or exactly on the upright, it's no good. I don't know. Good question.
But first off, one thing that this game reminded me of, the way we started out, was North Texas. I don't know how long ago that was, but we kind of struggled with North Texas out the gate a little bit. And then we turned it on. I don't know how long ago that was. Was that like 13, 14, 15, one in that range? When we played North Texas and we were down like 7-0. We struggled early and then we turned it on late. That's kind of what just reminded me of a little bit.
Yeah, that was 15.
But I feel like Cade was making a lot of like weird decisions. Like the first pick he threw, that was a great catch by the guy too. The guy, I don't know how the dude caught that interception. That was a great catch. But he looked at him, looked him up, then there still was two dudes there, and he threw it right to the dude. I'm like, there's two guys right there. Why are you just throwing it to somebody when there's two guys right there? I don't understand some of his choices. And then on the interception in the end zone, I heard people saying, and I watched it back again, that Nico was running wide open too. So I think that could have been another reason Brian was mad, is that like maybe Nico had a better look at like a touchdown than Seth did, and that could have been why he was mad too.
I agree with you on this, James and Don. I'm curious to get your take. It seemed like Cade was just late with his throws. His timing just seems off right now. Is that you think that's related to the injury, or is that rhythm and chemistry with his teammates, or just it's hard to get in rhythm when you're dinged up? How would you interpret those struggles?
Well, to be honest with you, part of the problem that I think Cade has to wrestle with, he's not 6'4", 6'5", or he's not that tall. And I know it sounds silly, but believe me, there are always players that are messing with your vision downfield. I'm just talking about the guys that are pass rushing and trying to get their hands up and bat a ball down and all that stuff. It's sometimes you simply don't have a good line of sight, and of course it's a challenge because you're continually adjusting in the pocket, and your eyes need to be downfield. I always used to explain to the quarterbacks, you have to see the field, your eyes have to be downfield, and then you have to feel the rush. And there's just a sense that you have to have as to whether you should slide a little left or right, or maybe climb the pocket a little bit. But it's just got to be a sixth sense. And by the time you finish your college career, you've been doing it long enough where you do develop a sense of how to move in the pocket, even though your eyes are still downfield. It's hard for a young quarterback to have that because it really takes a lot of rehearsal to be able to master that part of the game. And, of course, the guys on Sunday, some of those guys are really handy knack of knowing where to slide in the pocket to be open. Even though their eyes are downfield, they have a sense of where the pass rush is. And they invariably adjust the right way in the pocket, almost always.
And another thing, too, is like, I feel like he just looked, and like Corey said earlier, I feel like he looked worse, like looked more hurt today than he did the last 2 weeks. That's something I commented to my friends. Like, he looked more hurt today than he did the last 2 weeks, if that makes sense. Like, just running and grimacing, and he looked like he wasn't throwing it as well.
Yeah, that's why I know hindsight's 20/20, but again, I go back to the same thing. Why did he play? But there's a lot of people on here and a lot of people out there that would say I'm stupid for saying that. He needs the time, blah, 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 whatever.
Another thing, I brought this up to Corey.
I just hate to see the quarterback, like you said, grimacing every time he tries to run the ball 5 yards. That's what I hate. So.
I was just surprised the quarterback ran. You don't see that much. But one more thing before I get to my last point. Don, I got a question about this. What's your thought on this? And maybe they did this because they were in field goal range, right? But the whole Lachey, I hate when we were on 1 yard outs. We need 3 yards or we need 4 yards. We were on a 1 yard out and we throw a 1 yard out. And then you don't get the first down. And it's like you're not even throwing to the stick. So it looks like you're not even really trying, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, he could miss a couple tackles, but if you throw it 1 yard, that gives the defense time to recover instead of throwing it to 4 or 5 where you can at least get the first down if you catch the ball.
That makes me wonder, did the missed field goal follow?
Yeah.
I believe it might have, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're right. And the same thing would apply. I used to always think this way. If you need 2, then don't call plays that might get 2. Let's call a play that is going to be more clear cut. Or another way to look at it, if you're down on the goal line, you better think, even out on the field, you better think long and hard about sneaking the ball. The only problem with sneaking the ball is the line judge or the head linesman, the guys that are on the line of scrimmage. Somehow there's a big pileup involving the sneak, of course, and somehow they have to identify forward progress. That's hard to do. And, they need to see that football, at least at some part of that football, be able to gain that first down yardage, that necessary yardage. And in their defense, sometimes it's hard to even see exactly where the forward progress is. And it's you're always rolling the dice to sneak the ball in those situations. I'll never forget, we were playing over at Youngstown. The coach was the defensive coordinator right now at Iowa State. We snuck the ball down the goal line. I took that back. It was Jim Tressel that was the coach at the time, because he beat us in our first year of playing Youngstown. The second time, they came to Macomb and we beat Jim Tressel. So I used to kid coach Tressel. One of the reasons we always seemed to get along is I was one of the few coaches that had a 500 record against Tressel. The bad news, it was 1 win and 1 loss. That was it. But anyway, I made the mistake as a head coach of sneaking the ball. I thought we scored a touchdown on 3rd down on the goal line. The back judge actually came forward and moved the ball back behind the goal line and was even heard saying, you didn't score. Well, the obvious question is, who are you to be talking? You're back there in the back of the end zone. How do you know if we broke the plane or not? We were playing at Youngstown, and now we were spotted on the 1-inch line for 4th down, and I ran a motion that would make them think that it wasn't going to be a sneak. We snuck the ball again across the goal line, and even Youngstown, I think, thought it was a touchdown, and then they realized, oh, my God, they haven't ruled it a touchdown yet. Well, at that point, the players were smart enough to start celebrating, and the bottom line, we didn't get the call there either. The bus drivers, after the game, they said, Coach, you need to know this. We were standing on the goal line, and you scored on both plays. And I said, they were Youngstown people, of course, driving the buses. And I said, thank you for telling me that. But the thing I learned is don't allow it to be in the officials' hands. I'm much more likely as a head coach to run this clearly defined touchdown. Maybe kind of play where the back has a chance to not just barely penetrate the goal line, but to penetrate it by a yard or two. Maybe even runs in standing up, those kind of things. It reminds me of Hayden famously remember Chuck Long did this against Michigan State back in '85. Remember pop-out sucker pass? I'm sorry, just pop-out sucker, what we call it. 47 pop-out sucker. We faked the ISO left, rolled right, except Coach Fry told Charlie, be sure you got the ball up so the officials can see it, because 1 year earlier, you might remember this, 1 year earlier, Chuck Hartley appeared to break the plane in the goal line. We did not get the call, and we lost the game. And 1 year later, Hayden said, by the way, be sure the officials know you got the ball. And Chuck did. He had the ball up over his head as he scored. I wish he wouldn't have put it over his head, but at least he wanted to be sure that all 60,000 people saw the touchdown. To include those guys wearing stripes. So I know that was a long answer, but I'm kind of like, my thought is be careful just running a sneak unless you're just so confident you can just mush them for 2 yards and you only need 4 inches, that's fine. But if you need, let's say you need a yard and a half, you better think long and hard about sneaking the ball if you need a yard and a half. Maybe with Nate Stanley, maybe in the All-American Center, we can get it done, but maybe now we cannot, with the current players lined up in those same spots.
Well, Moore just got frustrated because it was like you need the 1st down, and then you run a 1 yard out. And obviously maybe him getting hurt on top of that made it a little bit more annoying, but it's like you need 3 yards. You run a 1 yard out, and then he gets hurt, and then you miss the field goal. And then it's just like it's stuck on top of each other. It's like it seems like he didn't even try. He's just like, okay, we'll settle for the field goal. Like if he breaks the tackles and gets the 1st down, it's fine. But if he doesn't, we'll take the field goal. That's what it kind of seems like sometimes.
Yeah, I was just shocked that we didn't just run the ball and be in better field goal range and take our 7-point lead.
James, I got one word for you. Hempstead.
Yeah, and I was talking about Ontario. You said Waller for Ontario. He went to
Did
Hempstead,
I say Dubuque Waller?
Yeah. You said Waller. But I was gonna say one more thing before I left. Syracuse is beating Purdue by 7 right now, so I don't know how much that means for us, but that's just something always to keep an eye on too. But I feel like obviously it was better the second half, and you got to build on it to go to Penn State, and it's your toughest challenge of the year. So if you can look good in this one, even if you lose, if you still look good, it's going to give you more confidence. I feel like going into a Michigan State team that is, like Corey said, in shambles right now. So
yep,
got to focus on that. But enjoy your guys' night, and it's always good to get a win, and we'll focus on being 3-0 and. Hopefully we just play well next week. That's all I'm asking for. I want to win, obviously. I want to go 12-0, but sometimes you just want them to look better than they did. Like I want Cade to look better than he did for sure. And hopefully the injuries aren't a big issue because they're piling up a little bit.
I mean, we all want Iowa to win, Don, but I don't think the team that wins the West is going to be undefeated this year. So, a loss doesn't kill you. Play with nothing to lose, and Maybe you'll steal one out in Happy Valley. Thank you for the call, James.
Yeah. Jump and dry night.
You too.
Another way to look at it, if we don't get the outcome we want next weekend, all we have to do is run the West. We run the West, we're in. Doesn't matter what happens against Penn State.
Lomansky says, Coach Don, have you ever thrown your own headset? It would be a negative for a player to take off their headgear and throw it to the ground. Or I guess that's a question. Would it be a negative?
I've never thrown a headset in my life. Now, you got to realize I was only on the bench as a head coach, but I never threw a headset as a head coach, no.
So, but as a coordinator, you're always up in the booth.
Yes.
Is that a little odd to you that Brian doesn't go up in the booth? Is that a modern thing? Why is he on the sidelines? Is that why does he make those decisions?
The only thing I would say is we had both of our coordinators in the booth years ago. Bill Brazier and Bill Snyder were in the booth. And of course, there were a couple of us other guys too up there. I think we had probably 5 or 6 guys up there. The problem with sideline is you just don't have much of a vantage point. You can't see very well. It's difficult to see, especially if you're trying to make evaluations about throwing the ball down the field. You need to have a good vision to be able to do that and be able to see the entire field. And in that regard, if you're a play caller and you're on the bench, that's fine, but you better have some really reliable eyes up in the press box to give you the vision that you need.
Is it possible, Don, that John Budmeyer is up in the box and he's communicating with Brian?
I suspect he is up there. I didn't notice him on the sideline today. I admit I don't really come looking for John. He is upstairs. It makes complete to me that he would be upstairs.
Okay. James Hunter says the ball has to clearly go through the crossbars, so we'll assume that's true. We're going to put our next caller. We're going to put you on hold, caller. We'll be right back
Does that
with
mean
you.
the part of the ball cannot even? Let me ask it this way, Corey. Does that mean the upright extended, if the ball in flight even touches that upright extended line, it's no good? Is that what he's saying?
If that's the case, then I would say that kick against Ohio, then that was the right call, because it looked like it was almost right above the. And if you think about it, if the crossbar is straight up, you can't assume that a kick that's going to go straight into the crossbar is going to go in. If anything, it might bounce out.
Well, that's why you heard me talking about center of mass. If the ball is absolutely centered on that goalpost, then in theory it would hit the goalpost and bounce straight back, right?
This is what Brandon says. He says the entire ball must pass through the vertical plane of the goal, which is the area above the crossbar and between the uprights, or if above the uprights, between their outside edges. Between their outside edges.
Between their outside edges. That now we're saying we get the benefit of the doubt by kicking the ball up high, because if it hits the upright squarely, it comes back. Right. But if it's above the upright, it's going to be ruled okay.
Yeah. All right, let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. We'll go to Adam, who's been on hold. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, Corey, Don, how are y'all today?
Doing well, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's a heck of a game. I'll tell you what, from where we were after Lachey went down to where the end of the game finished up, it's not a tale of two halves, but a tale of two emotions, to say the least.
Absolutely.
It was interesting to see the change in philosophy. I think my entire life watching the Hawkeyes, I've always kind of been down when they get the ball with 7 minutes left and they just run, just trying to burn the clock. I know a lot of people have a lot of different things to say about the possibility of going towards the points per game, contract amendment, and really, there's nothing wrong with going for the win and getting the practice in for your offensive guys, getting your backups the time to run these plays that aren't just a halfback ISO dive up the middle. So it was good. I was glad to see that. And whether, Brian Ferentz is a good offense coordinator or not, that I think that's just the way you need to run the ball. And
I agree. You know what? To a large extent, I agree with you, Adam. The reason I think it's a valid topic for discussion is because that's not how Iowa normally plays.
100% change in philosophy of something that I've been following from the mid-90s. And under Ferentz, we've never done that at the end of a ball game, especially the way they threw the ball, going for the first down, the 21-yard completion by Hill. Never seen that before, but I like to see it. I wish we've been doing that for the last 20 years. So at the end of the day, 41 points looks a lot better to the national, perspective of how this game looks, whether they watch the whole game or not, just check the scoreboard. So it's good to see that. I'm glad to see that. For the Penn State position, like you said, I don't think that game's as important as we want to make it out to be. Obviously, we want to win. Obviously, the most important game is the next one that's on the schedule. But from a Big Ten West perspective, that's not going to be the end all, be all. That's not going to have the final bearing on who's the Big Ten West champs.
Agree. And keep in mind that Wisconsin, who we perceive to be maybe the biggest threat in this division for Iowa, they play host to Ohio State, who's shown maybe a chink in the armor here or there. But that's an extremely difficult game given the fact that Wisconsin lost to Washington last week and then struggled today at home against Georgia Southern. Everybody has a tough game, at least one tough game outside of the division, Don. And the only disadvantage Iowa has in the race for the West is they have to go to Wisconsin. But the schedule is favorable other than that. And Adam's right. I mean, this is a non-divisional game. So it does mean less. It's not a double whammy if you lose. Can you talk about how you approach? I mean, obviously, as Adam said, every game is important. The next game on your schedule is the most important game on your schedule, as Kirk would say. But do you approach this game any differently from a standpoint that, hey, you're playing in a whiteout, you're playing at night, it is the Big Ten opener? Does Iowa go about anything differently this week?
Well, I would hope we would start with, let me say it this way. If we can identify a weakness in their defense, something that we count on that align a certain way, if we can find any vulnerability out there from looking at today's game in particular, I would hope we would use those plays early on, even in the first quarter, to give ourselves the best chance to jump out on Penn State. If there's a play that fits that bill, there may not be, but we've got to turn over rocks left and right to try to find some vulnerability that nobody's exploited yet. You might suggest, Corey, that how often do you actually find that? If you look long enough, you find it against just about anyone, but you got to look really long and hard to find it. And when you find it, you're thinking, I can't wait until we do this to them because I'm actually confident that we can get this done with this play. And it is gratifying when you run a play like that, and sure as hell it's there. And it can give you an early advantage that maybe gives you a better chance to beat a really tough opponent on the road. If we can do anything to discourage the crowd, then that's a big step in winning the game, to be able to get off to a good start and take the crowd out of the game as best we can.
I think back to 2009, Adam, and you probably remember this game as well. Tom mentioned it with the Adrian Claiborne block punt. Not many people remember that Darrell Clark had a huge bomb down the field for a touchdown to start that game, and talk about a whiteout gone nuts. And Iowa managed to find a way to win that game on the road, Don, despite the whiteout, despite the early fireworks, but that's typically not a recipe for disaster. Or it typically is a recipe for disaster on the road in those circumstances. Iowa did start out slow today, so that will be something to clean up for next week, Adam.
Yeah, I think some of the wildest games I've seen in the last 5 years or so have been Iowa versus Penn State with the last second, fourth down pass that they completed on us. I mean, it's just incredible games. I have no question that we're going to play them tough. If I was betting on them, I probably wouldn't bet the money line on the Hawks, but I think it's a game that we're always in. And, one thing that I think I'm using this term correctly, that transitive property, when we talk about one team going against another team and then comparing it to the outcome of Iowa plays that team. And, a lot of these games need to be taken into consideration in a vacuum, because what happened with Syracuse, Western Michigan, it doesn't stack up to how it's going to be with Iowa, Western Michigan. Each game in itself needs to be taken on its own two legs, and it doesn't have that impact that you can. It's great talking point. It's great forum talk. It's a great way to see it. But when these forums talk about what other teams did, it's a completely different game, completely different defensive strategies and offensive strategies.
Perfect example of that, Adam, is last night Utah State gave up a lot of points to Air Force. Don, being a former Army defender, that Air Force is a tough prep. And, I'm not excusing that poor performance by Utah State, but I don't think you can just say, apples to apples that, hey, Iowa only put up so many points against Utah State. Air Force did this. That means Iowa's offense still sucks. I don't think you can do that.
Right. Yeah. Option football is a different animal, of course, entirely different preparation than for somebody that throws the ball a lot and throws it effectively. And it was surprising that Air Force won that. The final margin was, but a significant win, right? A one-sided game. And I say that because they're in the same conference, so I would assume they play each other most years, if not all years. They're not like the Big Ten. They don't have 14 schools, so I think they probably all play each other every year. And incidentally, that still bothers me that we're going to expand to 18 teams. Imagine if you're in charge of scheduling, Corey, how many guys' name do you give out? And they're not going to want to play more than 9 games, 10 conference games. So think about it this way. You're going to play 9 conference games, and yet there are 17 teams that might be on your schedule from the Big Ten. If you're 1 out of 18, there's 17 different potential opponents. You're only going to play 9 of them. That means there's 8 teams you didn't play. And how in God's name do you end up with comparable schedules? I don't know how you can do it. It'd be difficult to even come close.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, yeah, scheduling is going to have a lot to do with who wins, I think. And let me qualify it. Maybe the best team, regardless of the schedule, they win out. Imagine they go 9-0, and maybe the second best team goes 8-1. But maybe there's another team that was 7-2 that clearly played a tougher schedule than the one that went 8-1. That'd be unfortunate, but it's going to happen. You can bet on it. Ideally, they'd have played each other head to head, but maybe that didn't happen either. That's the problem you have when you get into a league involving 18 teams.
Anything else, Adam?
No, I think we have a great shot to win the West. I think obviously we understand where the work needs to be done. We got a lot of room for growth, but it's exciting. 3-0 is 3-0. Win it 1-0 or 40-0, it all counts as a W. So it's good to see. I'm a huge Hawkeye fanatic. I appreciate your content, Corey, and appreciate the time tonight, Don.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate that, sir. CJ, Cade's leg was really bothering him. He is obviously injured more than they're letting on. Got to sit him against a team like that. Also, Campbell going after a fan was classic during the ISU halftime. So I didn't see that. I've seen multiple people bring that up to me. I haven't watched the video yet, so I don't even know. Was he going after a human fan or like a rotating fan, like an oscillating fan? Somebody explain that to me, because I really did. I don't know what that means, but going after a fan. Okay, apparently he did something during halftime that was. I'll tell you, Don, he's got to start winning games. He has got to start winning some ball games, because I've given him a long leash, and I know Iowa State fans have loved him during his stint there. At some point, they got to start winning. They were bad last year, Don, and they don't look good this year. They lose at Ohio, can't move the ball down the field until the final minutes of that game. They were stuck on 0 until like 5 minutes left in the game. They got problems. They got problems right now.
When did the missed field goal occur?
That was about 5 minutes to go, because that would have made it a 1-score game, and that's what the big controversy was. In fact, they lost by 3. That was the difference in the game. That was why it was such a big game.
10-0 at the time, and then the field goal would have made it a 1-score game. And
10-3, and then came back down and scored a touchdown, but it was 10-7, would have been 10-10 conceivably had things continued. Thank you for the super chat, CJ. Appreciate that. And also, Lemansky, I guess we got this one already. Thank you for that super chat, Lemansky. There is one here from Erica. Would have loved to be a fly on the wall during halftime. Whatever they said sure got the team going. Don, from your experience, I know you weren't a defensive coach. Well, I guess you were. Didn't you coach? Did you coach DBs for
1 year? 1 year at North Texas.
Good for you. So I'm just curious. Iowa gives up a bunch of explosive plays. Go back to that 1 year at North Texas. What do you say to the troops at halftime that kicks them into gear? What do you think?
The first thing you got to do is just point out to them if we contributed to the play with our misalignment or our poor reaction to what happened. You got to be sure and point that out. You got to correct what cost you in the first half, and maybe you have to even acknowledge as a coach, I can't call that anymore because we simply can't defend it. I'll give you an example. Remember when we played Wyoming in the Holiday Bowl? they were killing us with seam routes in the first half. Now, I was coaching offense at the time, but I still was in the same locker room with the defensive staff. And I remember vividly Hayden having a conversation with Bill Brazier, and he said, "Bill, we can't allow him to kill us on these seam routes. What are we going to do?" And Bill said, "Coach, we're going to play cover 4. We're going to play corners off in off coverage. Safeties basically defending inside quarters. We're going to have people camped over the top of those seam routes." And the next time they ran seam routes, of course, we had a safety hitting them right in the mouth shortly after the ball arrived. And that solved a lot of our seam problems, and we come back to win the game. So that's an example. Schematically, we got a problem. We got to correct it. And that's what good coaches do. Ideally, you don't have to wait till halftime. You're trying to make those corrections even as the game plays out. But sometimes you simply don't have much time to discuss it. You'd like to think you had more time on the bench to iron out our problems with the last possession. But what happens if you have to go back on the field in 3 plays or sooner? You have a hard time. It's a race to be able to correct the mistake from one series to the next.
Don, shout out to D-Rock Irish in the chat, pointing out that South Alabama is leading Oklahoma State 26-7 in the fourth quarter, and they're driving.
Wow. And that's one of the longest tenured coaches in college football, right? The guy at Okie State.
Yeah, Mike Gundy. Absolutely.
Mike Gundy, yeah, the guy with the mullet. Maybe he doesn't have it anymore, but he used to.
Thank you. Erica, thank you for that super chat. We've got a couple callers on our phone line. We've got Austin waiting in our queue. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more with Coach Don Patterson recapping Iowa's 41-10 win over Western Michigan. We'll be right back. Every day in the U.S., 47 children are diagnosed with cancer. Statewide nonprofit Children's Cancer Connection serves more than 780 Iowa families affected by childhood cancer. It provides new diagnosis resources, camps, family outings, and much more, all free of charge. This September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. How aware are you? Learn more, volunteer, or donate at childrenscancerconnection.org. That's childrenscancerconnection.org. Appropriate that this month is Children's Cancer Awareness Month, and I get to do the show with a cancer survivor. So certainly appreciate our advertisers, our sponsors, and appreciate working with this great organization, Children's Cancer Connection. We've got several people on hold here waiting to talk to Coach Patterson. We're first going to go to our phone line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Who's on the line?
Trent.
Hey, Trent.
Hey, guys. Hey, Corey, it's an honor to talk to you, man. Like, I really do believe you are like the best journalist following Iowa football right now.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know that I can come close to taking that compliment, but thank you.
And Coach Patterson, thank you for all you did for Iowa football, sir. It's greatly appreciated.
It was my pleasure and my honor to do so.
I don't know really where to start. Let me, can I just give you my thoughts on what
Sure.
I think this year's team really can be?
Yeah. Let's hear them.
Connor Colby today showed he is by far and away the best offensive lineman that we have. I don't know. I told everybody at the beginning of the year, if Iowa can go to Penn State, win that game, my honest opinion, bias or not, is that this is still a 12-0 Western Division championship team.
If they beat Penn State on the road next week, Don, what is the likelihood? That's a fair assessment. I mean, this may not be a great team, but the schedule's not very good, not very strong. Don, if they beat Penn State next week, it's conceivable they could get to 11-1 or 12-0. It's not going to be easy, but it's conceivable.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm aware of this. Last year there were 20 games in the Big Ten that were one-score games, 20 out of 64. So 1 out of every 3 games almost is a one-score game. And let's face it, we've been involved in quite a few of them throughout recent history. So the reason I bring it up that way, let's imagine we play really a really outstanding Penn State team, and that's probably going to be a close game. If we're able to beat them, I can't imagine we're going to beat them by 3 touchdowns. I don't know who could. I don't know if there's anybody in college football that can beat them convincingly. And the good news is we don't have to. We just have to somehow find a way to have one more point than they do. But even if we're able to get that done, it's not hard to imagine that we lose a couple of hard-fought games to 2 other worthwhile opponents. Our history is that we win close games like that, but it's hard to do it all the time. You've always heard me say, Corey, good teams win close games. That's true. That's the mark of a championship team is you win the close games. And if you don't get that done, then obviously your record's going to be something other than what you needed. We could beat Penn State and still lose to 2 West Division teams, and that would leave us more frustrated than we care to think about.
Yeah, let's just make clear that it's going to be hard to win at Wisconsin. I don't care. I don't care what Wisconsin team is. I don't care if Iowa beat Penn State by 20. It's going to be hard to win at Wisconsin. It's going to be a challenge to win against Nebraska on the road. And here's something else that we have to remember. Somebody brought it up in the chat a little bit ago. How about Rutgers? They've looked solid so far. They are solid. I'm not saying they're great, but they're solid. They've got a dual threat quarterback in Gavin Wimsett. I'll be intrigued by that one, Don.
And they are committed to running the football too. Not that they can't throw it. I think they have a chance to have pretty good balance in their offense, and they've historically played pretty darn good defense. So I think you're right. Rutgers is not a gimme, not by any means.
And what about Trent's comment about Connor Colby? Did you, without looking back on tape, can you really? I know that Gary Dolphin and Ed Podolak made him, I think, their co-player of the game. I don't know who the other guy was, but they obviously were impressed with Connor's play.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think their vantage point's a lot better than ours sitting out in the seats. It's just hard to evaluate an offensive lineman if you're just watching the game in the stadium, unless he's your son and you're looking at him on every snap.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can very well do it. It's just hard to identify without really studying the video which lineman played better than all the others.
Go ahead, Trent.
Okay, so another comment I'm going to make is this, and I haven't got to listen to much of the show, Corey, tonight, so I apologize for that. But so if you've covered any of this, feel free to stop me at any time. But I don't know if people are worried about this defense or not, but this is still a prototypical Iowa defense. Give up a ton of yards, but what did the scoreboard show at the end of the game? I mean, we gave up 10 points still. And that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, the first half, I made the comment that I thought the first half couldn't have went much worse. Part of me saying that is kind of trying to understand setting and the fact that they were playing Western Michigan, right? Context is important in this discussion. But they did give up 10 points in the first half. You're right, Trent. Shut them out in the second half. And they got to clean up those explosive plays. But in a way, Don, is it you don't want to see those holes, but right before Big Ten play, if you get a game like this against Western and you shut them out 59-0 and the offense is great and the defense is fabulous, what do you work on? I mean, isn't it almost nice to get exposed a little bit before we head to Big Ten play?
Well, you're right about one thing. I can promise you if Penn State doesn't try to duplicate some of the things that Western Michigan did today, I'll be a little bit surprised. We always assumed if something worked one weekend, you're going to get tested on that same concept 1 week later, and you better have it corrected. Sort of have it cost you one game is one thing. The crime, though, is to let someone turn around and do it to you the next week as well. So I'm sure that Phil Parker's going to be sure that we're not victimized the way we were today. And he'll, of course, know exactly what our problem was, and he'll be able to solve it. And that doesn't guarantee it won't happen again, but it all but guarantees that it won't, because at least our players are vividly aware of what our shortcoming was, and they're going to take steps to correct it.
And it was good to get Jermari Harris back out there before we head into the gauntlet of the schedule. And I say gauntlet, it's gauntlet relative to what they've started with. he needed this game to beat off some rust. Like I say, he didn't just miss 2 games due to suspension. He missed a whole season due to injury last year. So that, there's some lumps that I think Iowa took there as well.
Okay, guys, and then my phone's about to die, so this will be my last comment for the night. But
okay.
I'm sure this has been talked about, but in my opinion, today, LaShawn Williams showed that the hype is real that I think that the coaches have seen in that kid, and I really do look for him to take over the reins as RB1, and I think he can do it all. I've liked that kid since he was a freshman. And yeah, I don't know. Go Hawks. I still think they win next week. The ceiling's 12-0, guys, and that's the reality of it. I know Wisconsin will be hard, but people are sleeping on this defense, I think, already. They're just as good as advertised, really. Outside of the explosive plays, they still limited them to 10 points. If Cade can start connecting on some of these deep throws, guys, I don't know. Maybe I'm just feeding into things, but I think the sky's the limit. But, guys, I appreciate all you do. Thank you so much for taking my call, and both of you have a great night.
Thank you, Trent. Have a great night. I appreciate the positivity. I mean, that's maybe the most positive call we've had. And, I just want to make clear, me bringing up the things with the Brian Ferentz contract is not me trying to rip on Brian. It's a talking point. It is a talking point. It was made a talking point by the administration. That's a fact. I'm not the one who made it a talking point. And, if Iowa can go 12-0 and their offense is clicking by the end of the year, that whole contract thing's not going to be a problem. Right now, you see the tracker at the top of your screen. Brian is in fine shape, but we go into a tough stretch of games. I mean, Penn State's defense, I don't know where they rank nationally, Don, but Iowa's not going to average 5. I'm confident in saying Iowa's not going to average 5.9 on the ground next week at Penn State.
I think you're probably right.
Lemansky, appreciate the super chat, Lemansky. Don, your response with Tom on makes me smile. Love your offensive strategies and thoughts. I do too, Don. That's why I love having you on. So thank you, Lemansky. Appreciate that. D. Rolofson. Anybody else remember a year we had a gimpy quarterback, a weaker schedule, found ourselves in Indy and Pasadena? Well, about, 8 years ago? Let's enjoy the win. See how Brian Ferentz scripts his plays next week. Let's go Hawks. Don, let's just say this. It's always good to go into the Penn State game 3-0. If I recall, in 2017, they went into this game 3-0. I don't know what they were 2 years ago when they played Penn State in that game in Kinnick, but always good to be 3-0 heading out of conference play. No guarantees. Iowa lost to Iowa State last year. They nearly lost to South Dakota State. There have been, 2016, they lose to North Dakota State. So they took care of business. And by the way, you could argue in flying colors. I mean, there were kind of the lumps that they took, but Iowa controlled the game. They were up 20-3 late on Iowa State. Iowa State made a late push. They won by double digits against Utah State, and they won by 31 today. So if you're looking at the bright side of things, Iowa's done what it's needed to do.
Yeah, I made a comment during the week. I said one of our goals simply should be to feel better about our football team after today's game than we did 4 hours earlier. And I think we probably do feel a little bit better about our team before the game versus after the game. I think some of our questions have been answered. I will admit we feel a little better for sure about how we run the football, maybe a little more concerns about can we consistently throw and consistently protect, and can we eliminate. We're just so used to not giving up any chunk plays on defense. So it's kind of a shock to our system when one happens. But to our credit, at least it produced the only touchdown of the day for them. And we were lucky that one got called back too, of course. I don't know what happened on that play. You mentioned that our corner just fell down.
Yeah, and it was an ineligible man downfield, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, I don't know. I'd be curious what the replay showed, Corey. 2 ways to have an ineligible man downfield. One way, of course, is for one of those linemen to be downfield when the ball is thrown. The other way is simply for an outside receiver to inadvertently cover up an inside receiver. And you know what I mean when I say cover up. means they're both on the ball.
Right.
And obviously, if they're both on the ball, you can do that. But obviously, the inside receiver cannot go downfield at that point. Frankly, that happens more often than a lineman getting flagged for being downfield. Do you know which case it was?
That's what it was. I think it was the
A
outside
lineman?
receiver. Yeah. No, I don't think it was a lineman.
A receiver being covered up?
Yeah. I think.
My
I bet you
frustration-
could look at the replay. But I know Jamari Harris did fall down on that. I mean, he got burned.
Yeah. Was that just a drop back or was that play action? Do you recall? I can't remember either.
Yeah, you have a better memory than I do. But
I'm not sure.
you and I will both watch this game back on television, I'm sure, in the coming couple of days. Want to give a special thank you to RTI Threads. They're, of course, carrying Cooper DeJean's apparel. Visit cd3lacesup.com. Again, cd3lacesup.com. They have apparel for Zach Lutmer, Iowa linebacker Carson Shire, Aiden Hall, who's a freshman from Harlan, Iowa. Visit rtithreads.com to check out their awesome NIL roster, but specifically Cooper's apparel. cd3lacesup.com. It's flying off the shelves, folks. It's great stuff. Even get your Cooper DeJean golf balls. I know I'm waiting on mine. So, again, cd3lacesup.com from RTI Threads. Let's go to our next caller here in our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Who's on the line?
It's Trent. How are you doing?
Oh, this is another Trent. This isn't the same Trent we talked to 2 seconds ago, is it?
No, I think I hung up and then I called back in. I was on hold for a bit, and then I called back in, and then you were talking to the last caller, and you called my name, and I was like,
"Yep." No,
I was watching the live stream. So
apparently, Trent is a popular name. So good to have you here, Trent.
Well, yeah, absolutely, guys. It's a great night to talk to you. You know, a lot of people are getting critical over a lot of things that happened today, and in the end, I think you guys are on the right page. It's just kind of like 3-0 is 3-0, and you know, as ugly as it is or whatever in the first half, they kind of made amends in the second, and they did a lot of positive things, and that's what you got to build on. I mean, I'm a little worried about the injuries in that kind of thing, and we don't know what that is with Linderbaum or whatever. But you know, you just got to roll with it now. I mean, McNamara on that first pass in the first half, he kind of double pumped, and I think he saw something, and then that created that interception, whatever it was. But you know, aside from that, they came back in the second half. They regrouped. They came through against Western Michigan, and you just build on confidence. You know, you got to build this team as the season progresses. And they're 3-0, and Illinois lost today. You know, a lot of positives that you can take in the end if you know you don't harp on the negatives. I think that's the way I take it from this.
That's fair, Don. I mean, how do you balance that as a coach? If you were Kirk or you're Brian or Phil, how do you balance constructive criticism at this point heading into conference play when your record is 3-0?
Well, you've always heard me say you react from one week to the next, but you don't overreact. So you correct your mistakes. You know, that touchdown pass is going to bother Phil a lot. But I would be willing to bet that concept is less likely to be open in the future than it was today. So that'll be corrected. And it's a challenge, of course, to prevent the other team from scoring. It's kind of difficult to keep them out of the end zone all day long, but that's your goal, of course. And some weeks we're able to get that done, and other weeks it's more difficult. So we'll have a challenge on next Saturday. And I think the best advice I could give any coach with his team is be sure that Coach Fay used to talk about it this way. We want to be like an old mule with blinders. We just want to be focused on that next game. That's it. I've used the analogy, Corey, you've heard me use it. I like to think of it as a hurdle race. And any hurdler will tell you the only way to run the race is to continually focus on the next hurdle. So it's over one hurdle at a time. That's all. That's your goal. Our hurdle next week looks difficult. It is difficult, but that's the challenge we have. And if we can clear that hurdle, then we'll focus on the next one. We'll focus on Michigan State.
That's right.
But right now, our entire mindset is all about that next hurdle. That's the way it's going to be from one week to the next, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. And Coach Fry and Coach Patterson, Coach Fry did that, and it was always about the next game. It was never, it was always the game in the game, and then never focusing on what we didn't do right or whatever. It was always the next game and moving on. That's what Coach Fry did.
Well,
And
you do have to correct your mistakes because you don't want them to show up again next week. That's part of the process, of course, is correcting your mistakes. And you're right. Once those are corrected, then you move on. You don't look backward.
That's right.
Yeah. There's a reason that windshield in your car is really big and that rear view mirror is not nearly so big. Eyes are going to be focused to the front. Always the next game.
That's right. And that's what you guys did. And it was always, you could focus, if you're somebody that looks on the negatives so much, I think, then it creates a problem for the next week. In other words, if you focus on something that some player made, on the interception or the bad plays, and then you carry that over the next week, then that creates a negative a perception on the team. You have to erase what happened and focus on the positives and just carry it forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with you, Trent.
I always gave this advice to younger coaches, and I heard it from Coach Fry. The really successful coaches do a great job of building their players up. They don't tear them down; they build them up. You need to inspire that young man to play with great confidence, and the best way to do that, of course, is to prepare them as well as possible to get that done.
Well, you and Coach Fry and all your staff back in those days, and I remember, and this staff today, but you guys did the same thing, and I'm an old man, but I remember what you and Coach Fry did, and it was the same thing. It was just like, if a negative, you turn it into a positive. Somehow, some way, you find a way, and you all did that. And this staff is trying to do the same thing, and I think they will.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Trent?
No, that's it for me tonight. It was a pleasure to talk to you all.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your call. Yeah, good stuff. I appreciate the positivity. 3-0 is 3-0. Like you said, Don, you look at this and you figure out, what to correct and how to correct it. But there's a lot of positives 3 games in. A lot of positives.
Right.
You took back a trophy that you lost last year. You beat each of your G5 opponents by double figures. A year ago, they squeaked by a FCS opponent, albeit a good FCS opponent in South Dakota State. And it's, I guess they won comfortably against Nevada. Let's not even talk about that lightning delay. Did you leave the stadium today?
No, I never even left my seat. You'll laugh. By the way, if they do stop the game for lightning, that will guarantee you that we're going to be 30 minutes delayed at least. And today it was 30. I say 30. After 30 minutes, they then told the teams, you got 7 minutes to warm up. So our delay officially was 37 minutes. But we were lucky. We were tracking. They had the radar right on the big screen. And we were lucky. There was all kinds of adverse weather that passed just to the south. But there was one bolt of lightning, I guess, that hit somewhere within 8 miles. And thankfully, there was never a second one. And that gave us a chance to be done in 30 minutes.
Well, as you know, Don, I was at the game last year. You were not against Nevada, and that just turned into a marathon. And when we heard that weather delay today, I'm just thinking, oh my goodness. So let's just be happy that it was one delay and they got back on the field and they finished without a hitch. And anyways, Michael in the chat says, love Don's analysis. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that compliment for Coach. I'm glad for the second team that they got to see the field today and score. I'm especially proud of my nephew, Jack Doetzler, number 71. Good for Jack. He's a true sophomore, Don, or I guess you'd say a redshirt freshman from Wisconsin who is behind Mason Richmond at left tackle. He could be the heir apparent if Mason leaves early. We'll see if Mason has good enough a year.
Yeah, help me out too, Corey, because I was trying to keep track of how many. I know that Rusty got in and played earlier in the game. Again, he's clearly our sixth man right now. I think the coaches are pretty comfortable with him in the lineup. But beyond that, how many reps did the other backup lineman get? Do you know offhand? Was it one series or two?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that. I can tell you Bo Stevens did play for the first time this year. He's been dinged up. It was good to see him back in there. Did you see Dejon Parker in at all today?
I thought maybe right at the end, but I'm not even sure of that.
Yeah.
He definitely wasn't in. I'm sure he didn't get more than one series. I'm sure he wasn't in.
If Jack Dotzler was in at left tackle, I'd be surprised if Dejon didn't get some reps at right. But
if he was only in on the last series. I'm pretty sure of that.
The good news is it looks like they're healthy up front for the most part. How much, I guess, is a good opportunity. We're talking about health. How much does the Luke Lachey injury affect him? Let's assume he's out for the season, and I hope for his sake he's not. But that seems to be the consensus. That was a nasty injury. It's a blow. He's a really, really good player, really good tight end, obviously. But this is a deep room, Don. How does this affect your outlook?
Well, I'm encouraged. I know you've talking up a Stringer and Stylianos, is that how it's pronounced?
Yep.
You've been talking those guys up, and today we saw them firsthand, and we actually saw action in the passing game, and they looked okay. Maybe not quite as accomplished a player as Luke, but it gives Eric Hall a bigger role now to play, and I'm sure he'll embrace that. He's ready for that responsibility because he's more than prepared to do that in Michigan back in time. Played a lot of significant minutes. And it looks to me like we're going to be okay without – I hate to play without Luke because he's certainly one of those players. But that's the nature of football, of course. You're really lucky to make it through the season without losing a key player or two. Hopefully, Luke, if we lose Luke, hopefully he's the only one that we lose for an extended period of time.
Absolutely. And they've, knock on wood, we've knocked on that wood enough, Don, because they've been as injury-free as you could expect, I think, through mid-September. And you just felt like it's just football. And then there was going to be an injury at some point. Unfortunately, it happened with Luke. And I wish the best for Luke. I don't know if he'll come back next year, assuming he's done for the year. And that's a big assumption. I don't know if he'll come back for an extra year or not. I think he has he's got an extra year if he wants it. I don't know what he would look like on the draft boards right now, Don, especially coming off an injury. So that's a discussion for another day. By the way, Brandon does say in the chat that Parker was in at the end. So if that's
that last possession.
That's good news. Want to give a shout out real quick to our sponsor, Iowa Smokehouse, and of course their awesome snacks for game day or whatever day you're looking to scratch that itch, as they say. Use the code Hawkeyes at iowasmokehouse.com. Tasting is believing with their awesome beef jerky, their flavorful meat sticks, or their steak bites, their ketchups, their barbecue sauces, and their salsas are quite delicious. I'm a salsa guy myself. You'll never need to look anywhere else for game day or any snacking needs. Tasting is believing at iowasmokehouse.com and use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. And I've talked about this as well. When you purchase $50 or more in a single purchase, you'll get free shipping. So you'll get it right to your door. No need to go to the store. No need to pay for an Amazon membership or pay some large shipping fee. You'll get free shipping with Iowa Smokehouse, and they are an Iowa company. You're supporting a sponsor of the show here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, so we appreciate Iowa Smokehouse. We'll be back with more. Don Patterson here, Iowa Postgame, with Coach Don Patterson in just a moment.
Imagine the Possibilities is dedicated to empowering people to reach individual achievement across the spectrum of life. We believe in creating lasting relationships, empowering people for success, and cultivating joy. Our team of passionate people work each day to serve our communities in ways that create a lasting impact. We believe in creating opportunities for people with disabilities to achieve goals, build skills, and celebrate all that's possible. If you want to learn more about us or join our exceptional team, visit us at imagineia.org.
All right, let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Austin's been on hold. Austin, welcome to the show.
Hello, good to talk to you again.
You as well, sir.
I don't think I've called in since last season, but always fantastic to get a win, naturally.
Absolutely.
Can't agree more with those last couple of callers talking about, we have a great defense. We have a defense that at least 100 other teams dream of having and have nightmares of playing against. So we can't have any actual complaints. That said, I do have a question for, I guess, either of you. It seems like we've been lax on getting to the quarterback, right? Our defensive line not getting quite as much push as we're used to. And obviously those first two games we're talking about, they're getting the ball out quick. Makes sense. But it just seemed like today he had a fair amount of time, at least more than we're used to giving up. Do you have any thoughts on that, or why we're allowing that as much?
Don?
Well, I don't think we've gone with very many extra rushes at all. Typically, it's been a 4-man rush. And as you mentioned, in game 1, game 2, they got the ball out quick. We didn't have many opportunities. Today, maybe we had a few more opportunities. I just looked at the stats. We ended up with 2 sacks. Meanwhile, they sacked us 4 times. That's a good stat to have on your side, is to have some kind of edge in defensive sacks. Today, we didn't have it. It's going to be hard to beat Penn State if they win that same edge on defensive sacks. In the Big Ten, that's a significant stat to have on your side. Mm-hmm. Is you sack them more than they sack you. And if you think about it, it makes sense. We always refer to a sack as a drive killer. And oftentimes it's on third down, of course. You throw more on third down percentage-wise than you do on first or second. And clearly, if you get sacked on third down, then I would imagine in most cases you'd be punting on fourth down unless it's just a last possession type of thing. So, we need to – and the good news, I wouldn't be surprised at all if you saw us to try to heat up Penn State. It wouldn't surprise me at all if you saw more pressures involved in something other than just a 4-man rush. We haven't really resorted to that yet, and I would imagine that'll be part of our plan against Penn State. The only question is whether or not we choose to use it. But it'll be ready to go, I'm sure. You'll see some 5- and 6-man pressure. We're not going to do it much. That's not our style of play. Our preference, of course, is to be really sound in the back end, get good pressure with 4, and then be able to react up and tackle with good consistency, and that's what's made our defense so difficult to beat year in and year out.
So if I understand you right, you believe it's more of us allocating our defense elsewhere, not trying as much for pressure and rather trying coverage more so.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I do have a weird question. I'm not sure. Don, were you at the game today?
Yes.
Did you notice that there was, after every play, a towel in the middle of the field? So someone was leaving their white towel in the middle of the field. There was just always one there. And I know I saw the ref carry one back like 6 times, but there was.
I did see the center judge throwing the towel back behind him any number of times. And I don't even know where the towel came from. I'm like you, but no surprise that there are towels that get grabbed from time to time. And I don't know if it was the same towel all day long or not. Good question. I'm not sure.
And then one thing, Corey, I know I had sent an email to you long ago, but it was the same week that we had announced that our athletic director was leaving. So obviously the news was overshadowed. But when Penn State announced that this was going to be a night game, I went through and had some spare time, and I went through and looked at our win-loss ratio, or I guess our percentages at home. Oh, 1 second, I lost my light. I looked at our win-loss ratios at home versus away and day versus at night. So I thought you might be interested in this. Since 2008, and this is against top 25 opponents, at home during the day, we have won 37.5%. At home at night, 25% wins, so a little bit of a drop off there. And again, this is just generally against top 25 teams that we've played. Away during the day, we've only won 15%. But here's what gives me hope for tomorrow or for next week. Since 2008, away at night, we have won 50% of our games. That is our highest win percentage against top 25 teams is away at night.
Let me just argue something for a second, because I have a problem with one of those stats, and I know you acknowledged it. When you're talking about top 25 teams at home versus top 25 teams on the road.
Yes.
My only issue, or I should say during the day versus at night, my only issue with that is oftentimes the juggernauts, the powerhouses, get scheduled at night.
Yeah.
So you get a 23rd ranked Minnesota team during the day, and that game has been at night too. You get what I'm saying? I'd like to think Iowa's been a little bit more successful relative to their opponent at night at home than they have during the day. But maybe your data proves me wrong, Austin.
Like I said, this is obviously causation, is not correlation. I just like looking at the numbers, and I'll take anything for a glimpse of hope.
Yeah.
It is odd that our percentage is so much higher on the road than at home, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For night games.
Percentage on the road at night is 50 versus, what was it, 25?
15, I think you said, didn't
you? At home at night is 25%.
Oh, okay, 25 versus 50.
That 15 was during the day away.
Okay, daytime. Gotcha. 25 versus 50. We're twice as likely to win on the road. Thank God we're playing Penn State and Happy Valley.
Yep.
Well, I'll say this real quick. I'd be interested to know what the numbers look like specifically for the defense, because I was just flashing back to the last couple of road night games that I can think of. One of them being Rutgers, when the defense scored 2 touchdowns. One of them being 2 years ago against Maryland, where the defense, I think, had 7 turnovers. 7 turnovers against Maryland. So the defense really shows up on the road at night. I know that just from memory. And they were good last year on the road at night against Illinois, too. Held them to 9 points and lost.
Those presumably were not top 25. And to be specific, it's top 25 at the end of the season, not at the time that we played them.
Sure.
I guess, and then I did go through, like I said, I made this list months ago, so I don't remember everything to it. But at home, our night win-loss was actually just a touch lower than our day win-loss at 65 during the day and 63 at night. And that's just with everyone, not just top 25.
And that's both home and away.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Virtually, you're basically what you're telling me in general, Austin, is it doesn't matter if the game is in the day or at night.
I'm saying against the top 25, we're significantly up there.
So we should be happy. We should be happy they're playing in Beaver Stadium in a whiteout at night on CBS.
Yes.
Aren't we the lucky ones?
Yeah. Well, and that is kind of a narrative that we seem to have. We seem to play better when we come in as the underdog, right? So going into Happy Valley at night, that's the storyline. It's going to be a hell of a game. Iowa's got everything against it. That's where we seem to shine. At least that's the narrative.
That's my narrative.
That's the storyline that we like to say.
Yep.
So here's the reality. Our goal is to bring our A game both on offense, run and pass, and defensively run and pass also. Mm-hmm. We need to bring our A game in all 4 cases, and then we need to address the kicking game too, because we need to win that as well.
Mm-hmm. And then, I'm sorry, one other question I kind of had for you, observation. It seems like the sacks, or I guess the bigger pressure that we had today, seemed to be not so much big defensive pressure on Cade, but rather like coverage sacks. They're not getting open quite as much. I would have thought, or I guess looking back at our last quarterback or quarterbacks, we had no problem just tossing away. Everyone's covered. We're not going to take the sack. We're just going to put it out of bounds. No worry there. But I don't think we saw that at all today. Do we think that's just the competitor in Cade to say, I can make something happen here?
I don't care.
Okay.
I don't care. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm sick and tired of seeing a guy throw the ball away on 4th and 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm sick and tired of. So if we have to take 4 sacks, I'm okay with that. Now, Cade needs to get, all joking aside, Cade needs to get the ball out a little earlier, probably needed to settle down a little bit. Is that fair, Don? You're a former quarterbacks coach.
Well, part of the problem
too much.
when we were getting sacked, a lot of time the plays that resulted in sacks were plays in which we were sending receivers down the field. And in many cases, there really wasn't any good option short.
Right.
So understand what I'm saying? If you're sending 4 receivers deep downfield, well, you've only got 5 receivers, and hopefully that 5th guy's out in some kind of check down position. But worst case scenario, he has to block someone, and now you don't have anyone to lay the ball off to. So now you either throw it away, you put it down, and you run with it. That's about your only options.
I felt so bad for Hill when he was out there on what would have been his 3rd complete pass. The receiver he was originally staring down tripped right at the end or right at the goal line. So that went obviously nowhere. I was thinking, oh, Hill's going to go 3 for 3 today when I saw that go, and I was so excited. But no.
Well, appreciate your call, Austin. I always appreciate, I mean that. I appreciate your calls because you always bring insight, and please don't be a stranger to the show.
Absolutely. You have yourself a good night.
Thank you, sir. All right, Burger in the chat. Last time an Iowa wide receiver not tied into running back had more receptions in the game than any other player was. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. Let me repeat it. Last time an Iowa wide receiver not tied into running back had more receptions in a game than any other player was October 1st, 2021. Is that 51-14 win over Maryland. Arlen Bruce had 6 receptions for 43 yards and a touchdown. That's an unbelievable stat, Don. That is an unbelievable stat. It's been almost exactly 2 years since an Iowa wide receiver has led all offensive players in receptions.
Well, today we had a back, a wide out, and 2 tight ends, each of which caught 2 passes.
Yeah.
So
good.
we didn't lead, we tied. I don't know what it means.
Yeah. Thank you, Burger, for the super chat. Pugmaster, thank you for the super sticker. Appreciate that. Thank you for being here and for the donation. And I think to go along with that, he left a comment, meant to give you 5, but darn it, YouTube only gives you $4.99. Proud of you, Corey, and Don is the absolute best. I appreciate that. I am not going after Gary Dolphin. I can promise you that. But thank you, Pugmaster. Appreciate that compliment. Very kind words. And appreciate the donation. Mike says, what's Brian's average now? Well, check up on the right-hand corner of the screen. 28.3 is where we're at, Don. Did I do the math correctly on that? Did you check my work?
Yes. and just so you know, after the next game, we need to have 15 points to be still on every side. We get 3 games, we need 104. So 15 points will give us that 25 average. I don't know, 15 might be enough for the game. I'll admit that. I'd like to have more and just find out, in effect, that we didn't need those extra points.
You think 15 might be enough to beat Penn State? Did I hear you correctly?
I guess I have a little bit of faith in our defense, don't I?
Oh my goodness.
We've done it before.
A little bit of faith. 15 points on the road and
Wait a minute, Corey. Are you telling me with great confidence we're going to put up more than 15?
No, I'm not. I'm not making a prediction for the
You're
show.
saying we need to.
It
would not shock me if we hold them.
If Iowa holds Penn State to less than 15 points, then this
We'll
defense is a lot better. I think they'll win.
I'll take 15 to 14. I'll take 15 to 14 right now. My only problem is I'm not sure I know how we're going to make 15. 1 touchdown, a PAT, 2 field goals, and a safety. So there.
Hey, Don, let's give Iowa a shout out. We've been critical in the past of Iowa's lack of 2-point conversion ingenuity. They actually converted a 2-point play today. And
you know what seems terribly unfair? Did you notice this? It ends up not counting as a reception. Eric All had 1 target, 1 catch for 34 yards. And clearly there was a second ball that he caught. It's a 2-point play. Statistically, it does not show up as a catch. That's true. Always has been that way.
Okay, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but okay. Esther in the chat says, how is Lachey feeling after his injury? Well, Tom Kaker was with us earlier. I don't think anybody talked to Luke Lachey, but he was on the sidelines. It didn't look like he was in active pain. He was in the boot. He didn't look like he was in pain, but it obviously doesn't sound good. So we'll get more information, I'm sure, probably tomorrow. We'll probably hear something tomorrow, would be my guess. Paul says, who is in charge of developing quarterbacks? I know Brian is a quarterbacks coach. That guy from Wisconsin, John Budmeyer, is supposed to be helping, but who is actually selecting and training them? Nobody, says Paul. Well, that's the job of the quarterbacks coach, would be Brian Ferentz. I know they brought in John Budmeyer to assist. He's got certain rules and regulations and things that he can and cannot do based on NCAA rules. But, yeah, we're talking about quarterback development. That's not been a strong suit of Iowa. But keep in mind, Cade McNamara was developed at Michigan. I'd like to think he was developed at Michigan. I don't think Iowa had to do a whole lot with him since he got here, other than acclimate him to the system. TTV Taco Time 37. Let me repeat that. TTV Taco Time 37, Don. Love the show. Coach Don is a wonderful resource. So how about that?
Well, I'm a big fan of TTV Taco Time 37 then.
Josh says, why was Brian upset? I think we talked about it. It must have been upset with Cade and just the decision, the situation. But I haven't seen Brian that upset on during a game since the 2017 press box incident against Minnesota. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm missing something in there. But Brian typically keeps his cool on the sidelines. I'll give him credit for that because I don't remember the last time that he's had that type of a blow-up. OS for Hawks brings up the non-field goal in the ISU game. We talked about that earlier. What is a field goal? What is not? Kelly, who is RB8? That would be Terrell Washington Jr., true freshman who enrolled early, got some play. I thought he looked good as well after Kamari. I was surprised that he came in after Kamari Moulton, but that shows that they think a lot of Moulton. But I thought both true freshmen looked good.
And you know what's encouraging to me, Corey? If I'm not mistaken, those two young men had a total of 14 carries between them, more than just token carries. Yeah, Kamari had 8 for 50 yards, and it's pronounced Terrell or Terrell?
Terrell.
Terrell had 6 for 31. So the good news, one averaged 6.2, the other averaged 5. I'm really happy that we could get 14 carries for a couple of guys that might not see critical playing time until late in the season, but they got their feet wet today. And it was a positive experience for both of them.
Joshua says, who's angrier, Phil Parker during halftime or at the delay, or Brian at halftime? A little bit of cynicism there. Rick says, hey, Corey, why shouldn't Iowa score late? What's the difference? If Iowa puts up an extra TD on the board, it's not Iowa's problem. It's up to Western Michigan to stop them. Well, I didn't say I had an issue with it. I just said it made me a little uncomfortable. And I know it made people around me a little uncomfortable because of the situation. I have no problem with running the ball late. I do have a problem with trick plays. I kind of agree with Don in those situations. But the touchdown itself was not a trick play. They third and goal, under 40 seconds left. They had third and goal, and they ran it in with Max White. And I'm happy for Max White, sophomore walk-on running back who's again, worked very hard. I'm happy to see him celebrate that moment. Tucker says, any updates on Luke? I think we've talked about that, but I'm sure we'll get more official word tomorrow. Vital transformation. Corey is mad about that final touchdown because he would have picked the exact score. Isn't that interesting that he said that? I didn't even realize that until after he brought it up. He's right, Don. If they had taken a knee on that last play, I would have hit the score on the dot. I had 34-10 Iowa.
Well, you might recall a week ago, I'd done the math, and I said it would be nice if we could get to 31 because we'd be exactly averaging 25 points per game. And so when we got to 31, I was hoping that might be our number, simply because I would have a chance to say I was right on with my mention of 31. We blew right on by it, though.
Because IND 11, it's okay to question that score in the last seconds because of the Brian contract thing, and it's very unlike Kirk, or un-Kirk-like over his career. Doesn't bother me, but uncharacteristic of a Kirk-led team. I agree with every part of that comment. I'm not criticizing, I'm disagreeing with that. It's inconsistent to an extent of what Kirk would typically do, but maybe he's turned a new leaf. And maybe it has nothing to do with Brian. Kerry says, do we not have carts anymore to take off an injured player?
I'm sure we do, but only if they're absolutely necessary. And in that regard, typically a player leaves the field, with a couple of trainers, one on either shoulder, and they're comfortable with that. And I guess today that was more of the same. They were comfortable doing that and didn't feel the need clearly, if it's a broken bone and there's a risk to even move them, that's when you see the cards.
Springtime, that's Alex, who was on with us earlier, says, hey, Corey, I brought up Alabama and South Florida. Texas is tied with Wyoming in the fourth. Top 25 is struggling this week. And since he made the super chat, thank you for the super chat, Alex. Texas has now gone up 17-10 with 12 minutes to go, so we'll monitor that as well. But, yeah, it's been a weird week in college football. There's no question about it. C Lightning wants to know if Eric All has been a bit of a disappointment. I would say no. A tight end can only do so much, especially when you have a guy like Luke Lachey ahead of you. I think it will be interesting to see how Eric All emerges in this offense with Luke Lachey on the bench. I think that will be a storyline to follow, Don.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a bigger role to play now, and I'm sure he's excited about being able to contribute even more than what he already was.
Charles is right. They were 5-0 in 2021 when Penn State came to town to Kinnick. In 2017, though, they were 3-0 heading into the game at Kinnick, and they lost that game in the final play. James says it was a lineman. It was not a wide receiver covering another wide receiver. He says it was a lineman. So
Okay.
There you go. James is correcting me all the time. I appreciate it. James is on it. He's the same one that caught me on the Dubuque Waller versus Dubuque Hempstead thing. So thank you for that. Brian says, any idea how Cade is feeling after the game? Should have gotten that to Tom. I didn't. We'll see if I'm assuming somebody recorded some footage of Cade. I'm sure he's sore, Don. I mean, you've dealt with players with types of quad injuries.
Yeah, he's got to be because he took some shots today.
He did. I'm sure it's not just the quad that's hurting.
Right.
TCU, let's see, TCU 2 Hawk 2 Eye. Am I saying that correctly? What's the story on Jazz Patterson? Tom Kakert said earlier when they talked to Kirk that it sounded like Jazz kind of got dinged up earlier in the week in practice. Hopefully he's back full speed this week because they could use him next week against Penn State. They could use the tandem of LaShawn and Jazz. But it was good to see Kamari Moulton, Terrell Washington out there. It looks like Caleb Johnson's going to miss a couple of weeks. We'll see. Sam says, how will we fare running the ball if KJ and Jazz are out? Don, how would you evaluate Iowa's chances of running the ball if the running back core is LaShawn Williams, Kamari Moulton, Terrell Washington Jr.?
I realize it's a lot of pressure to put on a couple of freshmen, but based on what I saw today, I think they're going to represent just fine. I would expect LaShawn to get the majority of the snaps just simply because he's played in some big games and the other guys have not. So in that regard, I would bet LaShawn would get the majority of the carries, and then the two freshmen would be available to sub here and there, and still give us with good production at running back. I think that's entirely possible. I was impressed with those two freshmen. And LaShawn's numbers, of course, 12 for 145 yards. So that's a good sign.
This is a tough question to answer, Don. Kate Collin wants to know who's the best back right now, if you had to take one.
Every time I said I'm not the best, I said that several times. It seems like to the next, you might be a different player.
Don, you were cutting out there pretty hard. Yeah, you were cutting out
there.
Yeah,
I lost you there. It seems like one week to the next, it's a different choice. That's a good problem to have. If you really can't decide, you might argue there's that old argument. If you don't know for sure who's won, then you're simply not good enough with any of them. But I don't know if that's true with our running backs. You know, maybe this didn't come through, Corey, but assuming our two veterans are out, I say Judge is not exactly a veteran, but he has played meaningful minutes here and there. If we have to play with LaShawn and then the two freshmen, I would expect LaShawn will get the majority of the snaps. And those other guys would sub, but only in a limited role if LaShawn's carrying the mail well.
Kyle says, on 3rd and goal, Iowa passed, incomplete, then ran it in on 4th and goal. Thank you for reminding me of that. Boy, people are correcting me left and right, Don, which is fine. But that is true. I mean, they were throwing on 3rd and goal.
Yeah, it's not what we've typically done.
No, it's not.
But
yeah.
Welcome to the new world.
Galen Van Otterloo, on the two interceptions, were they bad decisions or just too late with the throws? It was hard to tell on television.
seemed to me that first interception, more than anything, was a great play by an underneath defender.
I thought it was more of a bad decision, but you would know better than I would.
Well, again, I haven't seen the TV replay. I've just simply seen the big board. And I just remember it was a really nice effort on his part. And he looked like a receiver extending for a ball. That's how good a catch it was. Obviously, Cade should have had the ball further away from that particular player because he was able to get there and control it. But I give a lot of credit to the defender for making a nice play. If one of our guys had made that play, we would have said, that's a great interception. That's what we would have said.
And James brings up Jarrett Bowie. I believe it sounded like he was the first true freshman to even see time this year, Don.
He's 84, and I noticed him in there, yeah. Pretty early, first half, like it was said, yeah.
Yeah, good sign for that young man from Tampa, Florida, Jesuit High School down in Tampa.
Yeah, I'm glad to see us put him in because, as you know, Corey, a freshman can play a little bit and still get the year back.
Absolutely.
So don't hesitate to use him especially against a non-conference opponent like we face today.
And I go back to Ontario Thompson. I know he's not a true freshman. He did play a year at Iowa Western, and he was really good at Iowa Western, won a national championship there, got the offer here. He's from Dubuque. I'm just happy to see him play because, boy, he's like 6'4", 305 pounds. He's a big dude, physical. And if this line weren't so deep, I think he'd probably get him some snaps. He's not. He's probably disappointed, but he's waiting his turn, and he's working hard on special teams. It was good to see him get that block punt, as I mentioned earlier. Lisa says, I think it's a great sign the Hawks could overcome everything going wrong in the first quarter and dominate the second half. We are 3-0. Absolutely, Lisa. Appreciate your positivity as always. Lisa's always positive in our chat. Ryan says, what, if anything, can help the passing offense? That's a pretty general question, Don, but what would you say to that?
Well, you've heard me say it before, and it's still true. There's a lot of responsibility that can be shared by a lot of people. I'd like to see our coaches do a better job of game planning and give Penn State some wrinkles that they haven't seen yet. And that's only going to be done with a lot of extensive film study to get an idea of what can work specifically against Penn State. So that part of the responsibility goes on the coaches, part of the responsibility goes on the receivers to be able to run the best possible route, to be able to separate from the defenders that are in position to threaten the ball. And then last but not least, of course, there's two other guys that get a lot of responsibility. The quarterback that's got to distribute the ball and the protection people, of course, that have got to be able to find a way to provide the quarterback enough time. So it's everyone's responsibility to include the coaches. And that's both game planning and play calling. So I would hope that everybody feels like they've got to share that responsibility and they got to be determined, I'm not going to be the weak link, whether it be players or coaches. I'm not going to be part of the problem. I'm going to be part of the solution.
Don Adams says, biggest adjustment I noted is that Iowa figured out how to defend the option. They were getting gashed by QB runs, gave up less than 40 yards in the second half. Did you see a difference there as well? It did seem like they were able to contain the quarterback. I didn't think any one of these quarterbacks that had played, they were too mobile or too much of a threat on the ground. At least I didn't see that looking back at tape against Syracuse and looking at their stats, but they did bust a couple.
Well, it seemed to me today, in general, when the quarterback was most likely to keep the ball was invariably, it seemed like a critical down. A lot of them were third and short, I believe, third and medium, where the quarterback, who was not typically likely to keep it, did in fact pull it, and it did have good effect. I made a comment to Lisa as the game played out. I said, I think we figured out that if it's a critical down situation, we better not forget that the quarterback may be out of character to keep the ball. And it had good effect for him. I don't know what they averaged, but I don't know how many times they converted. It seemed like more than a few. Trayson, how does it pronounce? Merguez, I don't even know how it's pronounced. 8 carries for 50 yards in gains. He did have 18 yards in losses, so he had a net of 32. And then Solopik had 3 carries for 23 yards along with 14. So this is a good point to be made. The only people that were double digits in running the ball for them were both quarterbacks. One had a long gain of 29. The other one had a long gain of 14. Everything else involving those other backs was all single digit.
Yeah, let's give Iowa's defense some credit because the one guy, if you look back at their first two games, that has been a big play guy has been Jalen Buckley, and he 14 carries for 30 yards. They contained him well. Had 194 yards Buckley did against was St. Francis, PA, week 1. And then he had 8 carries for 87 yards week 2, including a big play on the first drive of the game for Western Michigan. So they did a good job against him and against the run. Apparently, the Colorado game is out of control. I have not had that on yet, but apparently Jay Norvell and his Rams, Don, they're up 14-7, and apparently Colorado's star, Hunter, he's out, apparently.
Is that the player that plays both ways?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Can I be completely? I haven't watched a single game with Coach Prime and company.
Me neither.
2 weeks in, I will watch it. Apparently, it's 14-14. Steve says this O-line, this Iowa O-line, played a lot nastier in the second half. Got the best of the right tackle on the best. We got best on the right tackle a bit, but bested on the right tackle, I guess is what he's saying. But otherwise, improvement was there. Again, I have to look back at the tape, right, Don? Just sorry.
Cautionary note is do not lose sight of the fact that we're playing players that are not as good as the ones we're going to face next week or the ones we faced a week ago in Iowa State. These are lesser players. We should be able to do better against them, and we did.
Right. We're going to take one final break, folks, and we'll be right back with the final few minutes of Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson. We'll be back after this.
Imagine the Possibilities is dedicated to empowering people to reach individual achievement across the spectrum of life. We believe in creating lasting relationships, empowering people for success, and cultivating joy. Our team of passionate people work each day to serve our communities in ways that create a lasting impact. We believe in creating opportunities for people with disabilities to achieve goals, build skills, and celebrate all that's possible. If you want to learn more about us or join our exceptional team, visit us at imagineia.org.
Let's go back to our final caller of the night, our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Kyle's on the phone. Kyle, thank you for being patient, sir.
All good. How are we doing tonight, gentlemen? Good to see you both.
Doing good, Kyle. Celebrating the green numbers above your profile here. 28.3 and the arrows going up.
I am curious to see how long that stays green for, because in my estimation, I don't know what both of your guys' takes are, but in my estimation, I thought we needed to be above 30 points, maybe 32 points a game at this point in the season, because even from right now, I know we're at 28.3. We've got to average 24 a game from now till the end of the year. I don't see it happening. I'm curious what both of you think about that, though.
I don't know. They scored 27 against Rutgers last year, and 14 of those points came directly from the defense. So, we haven't seen a whole lot, and we got the pick 6 last week, Don.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts right now as far as the points per game thing?
I just think it's simply too early to project. 3 games down, 9 to go. As you mentioned, some good teams on that schedule that remains. And yet there's some other teams that we're confident we're clearly better than. Is it hard to imagine we might not put up 40 points against Northwestern? Is it hard to imagine we might not be able to put a number on Nebraska, because Nebraska's...
I was going to say, Northwestern's bad.
Yeah, Northwestern's not very good any way you slice it.
Timeout. Michigan State
It's bad.
Well,
right now.
They played the number 8 team in the country, according to the AP poll, got obliterated, gave up 40+. And remember the last time Michigan State came to Kinnick. Iowa put up 40+ that day when Rocky Lombardi was their quarterback back in 2020. So
didn't we have 35 at halftime in that game too? I feel like we had a lot of points in the first half.
2 pick sixes in the first half.
Yes, we
Charlie
did.
Jones had a punt return for a touchdown.
Yeah, that was a bloodbath.
Yeah, I doubt it'll be that bad, but my point.
Well, the good news, there are any number of teams we might hit 30-something or 40-something against.
Yeah, that's fair.
Possible.
We've had I laughed out loud at that wide receiver stat that came up on the screen earlier that you're reading from the chat. I was just kind of cruising through games. It's also been 21 straight games since our wide receivers have combined for 125 yards in a game. 21 straight games since that happened.
I hate to break in here, but Lemansky says there's punches being thrown in the Colorado game. CJ says they're fighting.
Yes, Travis Hunter just got he got hit by a really dirty play. He was running down the sideline, running a route as a receiver, and the ball went over his head incomplete, and the Colorado State defensive back hit him like 2 seconds late, like lowered the shoulder into him and gave him a huge hit he wasn't expecting, and he's now out of the game.
Yikes.
So I think after he did that, Shedeur Sanders like ran up to the dude and started like taking his helmet off like he was going to fight him.
Was the player ejected for targeting?
Nope, he was not. And I can
Well,
tell
it was a shoulder, you're saying, not a headgear?
it was a little bit of both from what I saw on Twitter, but it was 2 seconds after the ball, or at least a second and a half after the ball went over his head. It was bad.
Well, yeah, that's what you get when you get a rivalry like this and you have pregame banter between the two head coaches, Don. I wish Jay hadn't said what he said. I thought it was just, I don't know, immature. Maybe he's just trying to promote his program and the brand there at Colorado State. I made a comment on Twitter. You ought to be going better than 2-11 at your current job before I start taking shots at a first-year Power 5 coach who has a 2-0 record, and both of those games are against Power 5 teams.
Yeah,
totally.
You're right.
I just think
what he's accomplished. They have a difficult schedule. It's still a Pac-12 schedule, right? So I know they play Oregon maybe even next week. I'm not sure, but they have most of the powerhouses. Of course, we know who the powerhouses are because they're all coming to the Big Ten. If they play all four of those are four difficult games, and that doesn't even include Utah. Utah's good also. So let's see if Coach Prime can do it over the entire season. That's the bigger challenge. Right now, it's kind of novel that they got off to such a good start, but it's a long race, and you better not get too excited too quickly because you got to be able to sustain it for a long time.
Well, they go to Eugene next week to play Oregon on the road, and then they host USC at home after that. So that is
a gauntlet of a schedule to start
We'll
things.
know a lot more then, won't we?
They've got a couple. Go ahead.
I was going to say TCU, Nebraska, in-state rival Colorado State, Oregon, USC. I mean, there can't be much. I know that's some of that's Pac-12 stuff. Don,
well, they play Arizona State after that, and then Stanford. So two not super great teams. But then they have UCLA, number 24 UCLA on the road. Then they host number 16 Oregon State. Then they play Arizona. Then they go at Wazoo and then at Utah to finish the season. That is brutal. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 ranked teams, not including TCU, who was ranked at the time. So if you include TCU, that'd be 7 of their 5 games are ranked opponents.
Yeah, that's for a Pac-12 schedule. That's impressive. I'll give them that.
And I've never played there, but I do believe Pullman, Washington's not an easy place to go to either.
I think I think Wisconsin fans would attest to that, Don.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on? Because I know you've been coaching for a long time, Don. Your thoughts on, because I think a lot of people are, including myself, are a little bit too young to remember Deion Sanders, the player, what he brought in terms of intangibles and how that's transferred to his coaching. Like, what are your thoughts on his coaching style, kind of the culture change at Colorado and everything that's happened there?
Well, I don't know him personally. I remember him as a player, of course, and now I've got a little knowledge of how he did at Jackson State. I think the one thing he's doing well, obviously, put yourself in the shoes of an 18-year-old. You probably have heard enough about him and maybe seen him play when you were a small child or whatnot that you probably develop a real allegiance to him. You probably have a lot of faith in his judgment on how to play the game, how to function in game situations, and just to hear him, he wears the glasses and keeps the hat on and all that stuff. But I do really believe I do know this is impressive. Colorado, I believe since he's been there, has had their best GPA ever. That's impressive because I'm pretty sure he must address grade point also. I will admit, a lot of those guys, this is their first semester at Colorado. They weren't even there last spring. So we'll see how their GPA holds up this fall, I guess. I think it's horrible that you can have 60. I heard the number 62 transfers. That's a little absurd. And the thing that comes to mind for me, what about those guys that were on scholarship at Colorado that I'm sure in many cases were told, you need to go somewhere else? I think that's unfortunate that players were probably told to leave. Some of them just chose to leave, of course, because they didn't like the direction that Buffalo football was headed. For whatever reason, they were opposed to the idea of playing for Coach Prime. But so many others, I'm sure, were simply shown the door. And I think that's unfortunate because they really didn't do anything wrong other than be guilty of playing for the other staff. It seems a little absurd that you could somehow have 62 new players, because to do that means you had to run a bunch of guys off.
Yeah, the only thing I think throughout his entire tenure, because I totally agree with you. I mean, his focus on character, his focus on doing things the right way, being pleasant to people. Like I like the energy. The only thing that I heard from him the entire, whatever number of months he's been there was when he walked into the football room the first day he got there and said basically like, I'm bringing like my Louis Vuitton luggage with me and like some old stuff has to go and all that. Like walking in and telling a group of guys that's like 20 years old that like,
right.
That was the only thing I
It's
heard.
unfortunate, but that's you can have as many transfers as you want.
Yeah, and I think the other, I guess the flip side to that too is they signed him to almost $30 million contract, and there's not a whole lot of patience whenever you sign somebody for $30 million because they said at the time Colorado admitted it that they didn't have the money to pay him at that time, and they were kind of relying on their team success to pay off that contract. So
yeah,
I mean, fair play for doing that, but.
That reminds me, Mel Tucker's got a huge contract too, doesn't he? Unless it's somehow ruled that he messed it up to the point that they don't owe him any money. We'll see how that all plays out.
Yeah, it says he's got 6 years and $33 million left on his deal.
Might have to sacrifice a little bit of that.
We should get a pool going to determine how much he actually gets away with.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to get a lot of. I mean, he's already made a lot of money there, Don.
Yeah,
right.
A couple of years, a few years, he's already made a lot of money. So, anyways,
what with games like this, and this is both of you, I found today to be an extraordinarily confusing game because the first quarter I was DMing back and forth with Corey, and I was a mess after that first quarter. Obviously, the Lachey injury made me sick. The way that the defense played, I thought was terrible in the first quarter for our standards, at least. And the offense looked anemic. And then, you look at the box score at the end of the game. If you take away the sacks, we had 289 rushing yards at an average of almost 8 yards a pop. And we scored 41 points in a game that we scored 0 in the first quarter. So that would tell you that the offense was probably pretty good the rest of the game. And we scored 2 points on special teams, but there were no defensive touchdowns. What do you read more into the start of it, like the ugly start of a game like that, or to the finish? Or how do you interpret games that are so bipolar in terms of one half or the other, or one quarter or the other three? How do you read into games like that?
Well, the thing that comes to mind for me, since the next one's up, we're not going to have that luxury against Penn State. I don't think we can start slow in Happy Valley and beat Penn State. I think we have to have 4 productive quarters that we can all take pride in. It's going to be a challenge. We're going to have to play a really good game for 60 minutes to beat them. Anything less than that's not going to be good enough. So I don't even want to think about a slow start, because one thing we have to do is discourage all those people that are dressed in white. Because that's a big advantage if we allow it to be a big advantage. So we got to find a way to shut them up. We got to. I've heard a lot of players say one of the biggest thrills in college football is going on the road and making a play to shut up a home crowd that's huge in numbers, whether it be Penn State or at Ohio State or Michigan, doesn't matter, any of them. It's a wonderful feeling to be able to shut them all up at the same time. The only way to do that is to make a great play. Hopefully we get those great plays in this next Saturday night.
Your thoughts, Corey, too, on that, and also the start and the finish of the game, how different they were?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you, Kyle. I think it's just odd. It was an odd game, and you're right about the whole, only 2 points were scored on special teams. Now, we say only. We're just like, we brought up the Rutgers game last year where 14 of the 27 points were scored directly by the defense. How many short fields did Iowa have today? They had at least one, right? Cooper DeJean had a big return that took them to the plus 30?
Yeah, plus 30, plus 35.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously the special teams and the defense helped, as they always do, but there weren't it's not like they had a bunch of turnovers created in this game. A ton of short fields. And so, yeah, I mean, when the let's be honest, this is the one thing we saw today that we haven't seen in a long time was the ground game working. And when the ground game's working, it changes everything, right, Don? It just makes this style of offense so much easier to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about hidden yardage, Cooper DeJean, 5 punt returns for 77 yards.
It's really good.
Really good.
4.
Yeah. So if they can get that, I've been a little bit underwhelmed by Cooper in the punt return game. I will say today changed my mind a bit because those numbers are really good. I'm glad that they got him out late because he took some, you take some hits back there too, Don, returning punts.
Right.
And I'm glad to see they got Caden Weegan in there. I'm not saying throw Weegan to the Wolves, but that's a kid who has got speed. By the way, can I just make a comment? This is completely off topic. I'm going to be a little critical of Brian Ferentz and play calling for a second. I'm sure I never have done that before, right? But would it be feasible, and maybe I'm simplifying this too much, Don, wouldn't it be feasible to maybe get your fastest, most athletic receiver, get him down the field at times, as opposed to just, it seems like we've grown content with running Caleb Brown on these reverses, and that's fine to some extent, but if he is everything we thought he was athletically, wouldn't it also be good to see if he could, I know they've ran him on some go routes, but make a concerted effort to get him the ball down the field?
Well, the only comment that I made, the reverse was worth, I'm sorry, was it just a fly sweep? Or was it a reverse to Caleb?
I'm sorry. The reverse was to, no, you're right. The reverse was to Seth Anderson. You're right.
Yeah.
The reverse was Seth. They ran a couple of sweeps. They ran sweep action probably 3 or 4 times, didn't they, with Caleb today?
They ran 2 sweeps with Caleb for 8 yards, is what the box score says.
Yeah, I don't remember the second one even, but I do remember the first one because it was the 9-yard gain. I remember thinking he hadn't caught a pass yet, right? To my knowledge, that's the first ball that he possessed that he had a chance to advance in a game. So I remember thinking, well, thank God they just decided, you know what, if we can't throw it to him, let's just hand it to him.
Sure.
So in that regard, I was glad to see it. You heard me say it before. We got to find ways to get him the ball just to give him a chance to run with the ball. It doesn't have to be a complicated throw down the field. It could be something as simple as a swing pass to a back or a drive route to an inside receiver that's going across the formation.
I can tell you as well, watching that, I watched a good majority of that Illinois-Penn State game today. I do not want to see us trying 4 or 5 fly sweeps against or reverses against Penn State next week because that defense is fast. That defense is fast and that defense is athletic. And I don't know. I mean, getting the ball to the sideline, throwing the ball is one thing, but like trying to run it to the sideline against those guys and get the corner, I just don't see that happening.
Fabulous. Fast defense, athletic defense, playing in a whiteout, Beaver Stadium, top 5 team. Bring it on, Don.
I'm
ready.
That's right.
Terrified.
Terrified. Kyle's terrified.
I for the defense, I feel like Drew Aller's a young guy. You know, they could rough him up. There's a scenario in my head that Cooper DeJean and Xavier Wampa or Higgins make some plays. But I'm not looking forward to watching the offense play next week.
I'm just looking forward. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to I got a big frozen chicken that I'm going to defrost this week, Don. I don't know how long does it take to thaw out a frozen. Call Lisa down. How long does it take to thaw out a frozen chicken? Do you know, Don?
I have no idea, and I don't plan to find out over my next 20 years either.
I need to thaw out this chicken, shove an onion into the chicken, and let that thing bake in the afternoon. I'm going to enjoy the dinner. So that's what I'm looking forward to next Saturday night, Kyle. Is
if we have another break, I'll ask Lisa during the break.
Okay. I'm gonna have a nice whole chicken next week, Kyle, and enjoy a night game. I'm not gonna enjoy being up until I don't want to know how late I'm at. We'll probably have to let Dawn go to bed, but I'll probably be up late that night. Let's just hope we're talking about a monumental win in Happy Valley. That would be fun.
Corey, you know I'm the same guy that's up late every night, so it won't bother me to have a post-game show.
You're not flying out to Happy Valley? We haven't talked about this.
No, I'll be happy to watch in the comfort of my home.
Good for you. Me as well.
It'll be a fun one. One last thing, and then I'll let you guys go for the night. I heard about the Cooper DeJean golf balls, Corey. Any idea about what brand those are? Because that perked my interest, but obviously I can't be playing anything out here.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good question. Let me find out because, and I meant that when I said I'm waiting on those in the mail.
If they're good, I'll order them.
Yeah, let me just I can check here on their on the site. Let me actually. Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. So this is a look at Cooper DeJean's website and the different items available there. Let me see. Where is we're going to kind of explore this together. I know I found obviously I found the balls.
Yeah.
We're right there.
Callaway.
Okay.
Warbird.
Callaway Warbird. That's pretty cool that he's gone that direction. I've seen several of the Iowa players out or at least I did over the summer at Finkbine playing golf, and he was one of them that came out a couple of times. So I'm interested as to why he's went that direction. I think it's really cool.
Super cool logo too. So yeah, definitely check it out. cd3lacesup.com.
Yeah, I'm gonna be out of action here, Coach Don, for about a week and a half here in October. I'm getting a little mid-semester break. My dad and I are going over to Northern Ireland for about 10 days. That's where he grew up and my mom grew up, and all our extended families over there. So we're going to be heading up to Portrush in Northern Ireland to play a course that he's.
I was going to say your golf clubs are making that same trip, right?
Oh, they are. I couldn't leave them behind. I never have. We go there. Well, when I was a kid, we used to go there every year to play, and the clubs are making the trip. But we're I can tell you, it's heaven on earth up there.
Well, Kyle, appreciate you calling in. Appreciate the help you've given to the channel and the platform, and I hope you can continue to call in. Maybe you'll call in from what's your schedule in Northern Ireland coming up?
I'm going to leave on October 5th or so, and then I'll be back around the 15th. So I don't know what games that overlaps with, but it's about 2 weeks away, 2.5 weeks away.
Yeah, you're going to have a couple of games in there. So you're going to have to call in. It's going to be like 4 a.m. over in Ireland if it's a big game at Iowa. So
I've got an online class that I have to call into, and it doesn't end until 10 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. So I'll have myself about a 4 a.m. morning for that one as well. So I don't know. Maybe I just adjust with the time change.
Awesome. Well, good to talk to you, Kyle, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate both of you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
All right. Appreciate everybody being here. We've hit our limit here, our 3-hour mark. T. Hink says, are you concerned about this team 3 games in after watching today? I mean,
of course.
We're always concerned, right?
We're always concerned. Coaches and radio hosts are always concerned.
I'm concerned from a standpoint of I don't know that the run game is going to be able to. I'm glad we saw what we saw today. I'd rather what we saw today, dominant run game and iffy pass protection, because we had seen 2 strong pass protection performances the first 2 weeks. So we'll see how that works out. Nathan says, any word on why the opposing coach for Western Michigan skipped the postgame interview? Was it related to the late TD? I have no idea. Louis says, did Iowa have a Penalty today, they had one. Right, Don? One penalty.
I'm not sure. I can check as we talk.
I'm on the box score right now. You're probably better at finding these things than I am, but let's see, penalties for the day. Where's penalties at, Don? Why am I not seeing?
I'm closing in right now. Let's see.
Sacks, PAT kicks, 2-point conversions.
They had 8 for 64. We had 1 for 5.
Where are you seeing that?
It's up above. It's kind of an odd place to put it. It's under total offense yards. You got total offense plays, average per play, fumbles, penalties.
Okay, that is not for it on the box score.
Yeah, I don't know why they put it there, but they always have.
Okay. Tacoon says, question for Coach, what should Iowa's game plan be? Let's save this, Don, because I have one more thing before we come back to this for our final question. G. Willie Kurz, Cade is obviously not able to roll out or scramble very effectively. Will this be the case all season, or is his quad injury expected to improve enough that he will be able to leave the pocket? He left the pocket a little bit today, Don, but I think we're just speculating, right, at this point? There's no idea that's going to heal up.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not optimistic that he'll be able to operate on what we call movement passes next weekend. Maybe not. I just was concerned that he took so many shots today. He had some hard hits today, and we clearly are not very comfortable with a lot of nakeds on his part. So we'll see. Maybe element of surprise is there, of course. We haven't run them in 3 games, so obviously the first time we run one against Penn State, it'll be a surprise. And then it might.
Wanted to give everybody a quick update on scores, and we'll give everybody a final kind of box score breakdown of this game, and then we'll leave with our parting comments from Don on Penn State. So again, we're talking Iowa's 41-10 win over Western Michigan. Of course, our RTI Threads player of the game was none other than LaShawn Williams, who had a really, really strong start to this game. Had 12 carries, $145 on the ground, 2 receptions for 27 yards and a touchdown. He was shifty. He ran strong. And if they can get Jazz Patterson back next week, boy, that would really help the cause, have that kind of two-headed monster as we await the return of Caleb Johnson. Iowa was really good on the ground overall, 254 rush yards, 5.9 yards per carry, and consistency. I mean, you had a couple of big runs, but for the most part, this was a consistent day. It was not – the stat sheet was not swung by one major run like it was last week with the Jazz Patterson 59-yard burst. Don, was the what looked to me like a counter play, was that the same play we saw for Jazz last week, the one that broke today for LaShawn?
I think. I know we ran our counter and had pretty good success doing it. You know, when you see 2 linemen pull, or maybe a guard pulling, and the tight end as the cleanup guy. You know, we ran several of those today, and I think they did have good results. We had good running lanes on our counter in general.
Cade McNamara, 9 of 19, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 INTs, did take 4 sacks, took a beating. He needs to get some rest, but he's also got to be ready for game week this week. Obviously, a big game coming up. And besides LaShawn, Kamari Moulton had 8 carries for 50 yards. Terrell Washington Jr., 6 carries for 31 yards. We had Seth Anderson got a 30-yard burst on a reverse. Jazzian Patterson did run 6 times for 20 yards. He's kind of dealing with an issue right now, injury-wise. Max White had the touchdown there at the end. Caleb Brown had 2 carries for 9 yards. Through the air, Steven Stilianos with 3 catches for 29 yards. LaShawn had, again, 3 catches for 27 yards. Addison Estringa with 3 catches for 19 yards. Deontay Vines, 3 catches, 7 yards. Had that touchdown.
Those are targets, I think, rather than catches.
I'm sorry, you're right. All those that I said 3, you're a box score whiz. You know right where I'm at, Don. All those that are people that I just named, 3 targets, not 3 catches, 2 catches apiece for all those people we just talked about, including Deontay Vines, who had the touchdown catch. Eric All had 1 catch for 34 yards. Seth Anderson, a catch for 13 yards. Nico had 1 catch for 4 yards. Again, Luke Lachey left with the injury, and I think it's funny that Logan Jones gets a target.
You're right.
I think that's funny. Logan Jones gets a target, Don. Are you serious? Why do they list Logan Jones as targeted?
And yet, Eric Hall doesn't get any credit for a 2-point play.
Right, exactly. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Don mentioned Cooper DeJean, 5 punt returns for 77 yards. And Terrio Thompson had the blocked punt, blocked into the back of the end zone, resulted in 2 points. Give him a ton of credit. And, just a good day overall on both sides after kind of a weird first quarter, and they're dealing with the injury, the weather. But hopefully they're able to absorb these things and get some people back. Hopefully Jazz is back healthy. They can get Caleb back soon, and we'll move on to Penn State. So let's talk a little bit about this game, Don. Bo in the chat says he believes Penn State could be vulnerable still with a young quarterback, young running back, under the lights. Tekun goes on to say, what should Iowa's game plan be against those guys? I think, Don, I've been saying it for a long time that I feel more comfortable with a veteran like Cade McNamara than I would with a guy like Drew Aller going on the road. But Drew Aller is at home under the lights, and he's a 5-star kid who's looked really good, and that offense has looked really good, as has their defense. How do you game plan against Penn State?
Let me give you some reason for optimism. I'm looking at the stats now from the game. I had an idea that it might be like this. If you heard me talk about the first part of the game, they turned the ball over 3 times in not much more than 1 quarter of play. And yet even then, the score was only 13-0. They held them to field goals twice. The third time they managed to score. So the defense was hanging in there at that point in the game, I thought. Here's the part that surprised me a little bit. Final stats, Penn State was +5 on turnovers. If you're +5 on turnovers, you're going to win the game every time.
Right.
I don't know. I can't remember a time when somebody was +5 on turnovers and lost the game.
And 4 of those were interceptions thrown by Luke Altmaier.
Correct. So that's encouraging. They were +5, and yet when you look at total offense, Penn State had 383 on 77 snaps. Illinois had 354 on 73 snaps. So despite turning the ball over, they did move it. So that's encouraging that they moved the ball that effectively against Penn State. I realize a lot of the yards might have come late when the game was already settled. I don't know that. I suspect that's probably true. But the bottom line is, and something we're good at is not beating ourselves. It all starts against Penn State. We better not turn it over, because they're not likely to turn it over much at all either. And any kind of edge on turnovers, of course, greatly with chances of winning the game. So we know we have a chance of winning the punting game. I find it hard to believe that their kicker is any better than ours. That's for sure. We like Cooper returning punts, so we got a lot of streaks to talk about. And our defense, of course, is historically not going to give up many big plays. So inexperienced quarterback going against a veteran defense in so many ways, playing at third place, but there's still a lot of pressure on them. And let's face it, if we get off to a good start, then the pressure does mount, because the crowd's irritated that the game's not playing out as it was supposed to. And maybe the fans are a little bit disgruntled. And that quarterback really hadn't experienced much of that yet.
Right.
So let's make him uncomfortable by getting off to a good start. If we can win on turnovers, get off to a good start, not have to play from behind, because I don't have great confidence in our ability to come from behind. But if we can start fast and maintain that and be hanging around until the fourth quarter, then at that point the pressure's really on Penn State. After all, they're the ones that are supposed to be able to defend their home field.
Without having watched the game, and I'll go back and watch the game before I come out with my official preview this week, Don, looking at the box score, the stat sheet alone, a couple maybe things that Iowa can take advantage of. Penn State was mediocre on third down. I mean, they were 7 of 18. They were okay, not great. They only threw the ball 5.9 yards per pass attempt.
Right.
That's not great, right, Don? I mean, they ran for 164 yards, had 7 penalties. You're right about the turnovers thing. That was the difference in the game. You can't 5 turnovers, and they only lost by 17. 5, being -5 on turnovers, Don, might in a typical game result in losing by 30.
Correct.
They only lost by 17. Now they were on the road, or excuse me, Illinois was at home, lost by 17. And Iowa, of course, will be going to Happy Valley. But I'm with you. Play clean, avoid turnovers. Cade cannot, those 2 passes that he got picked today, those are things he's got to clean up. If you're Kamari Moulton, I know he's a true freshman. You can't be fumbling on the goal line. I know you can't play a perfect game, but those are things that you got to be looking at and cleaning up.
Very true. Let's begin by not beating ourselves. Something we're good at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Appreciate everybody being here, folks. One final shout out to RTI Threads. Appreciate them sponsoring post-game coverage throughout the year. They're proudly carrying the official apparel of merchandise of Cooper DeJean, including those golf balls we looked at a little bit ago. Visit cd3lacesup.com. They're also carrying, they're also carrying merchandise for Zach Lutmer, Carson Shire, Aiden Hall, as their NIL roster continues to grow. And I know they're expanding to some other sports here in the coming months. Visit rtithreads.com or, again, cd3lacesup.com to check out their awesome products. They'll be with us throughout the season. We appreciate RTI Threads over in Western Iowa. Don, we appreciate you being here for the last couple of hours. Glad to be recapping an Iowa victory and a 3-0 start. We'll talk to you next week late, hopefully talking about a monumental win in Happy Valley. It will be a CBS game. It'll be fun.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
All right, folks, for Coach Don Patterson, I'm Corey Braddock from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Have a great night. I will talk to you tomorrow.